Prologue. Li Jinxiang loved the world of fantasy. It was more than mere fondness. It bordered on deep admiration. His interest was so profound that he spent every bit of his paycheck collecting not only fantasy novels, but also manuscripts on history and mythology. Fantasy wasn't just a hobby, it was a passion. That was why he always yearned for something beyond the ordinary. He wanted to go to a world of fantasy, a world of magic and wonder. Jinxiang didn't leave his dream confined to his imagination. He quit his job and set off on a journey of realization, seeking out mysterious landscapes and places untouched by others. Over the years, he ventured to remote parts of the world, uncovering secrets hidden from civilization. He conquered the highest mountain, ventured to the southernmost point on Earth, and even explored the center of the planet. But of course, nothing out of the ordinary ever happened. Reality was the furthest thing from fantasy. By this point, it would have been reasonable to give up, but Jinxiang couldn't. Every night, he prayed to every god in existence and even those beyond this world, wishing that, when he awoke, he would find himself smack in the middle of a fantasy. And finally, his prayer was answered, just not in the way he had imagined. "This isn't what I wanted," Jinxiang said with a sigh, his breath instantly freezing and falling to the ground like ice. He lifted his head, his face weary with disappointment. Before his eyes lay an endless expanse of bitter cold. The man looked out into the distance with a melancholy gaze. Wearing nothing but a light leather vest, he seemed unaffected by the brutal, raging cold, staring blankly into the vast white beyond. "What are you doing?" A voice came from behind him. A woman with gray hair, dressed similarly in light attire, tilted her head curiously. "Just admiring the view," the man said. "Why?" "To calm my mind." "Why do you need to calm your mind?" "Because I'm tired. Stop asking questions, you clueless barbarian." "Your mind is tired." She cocked her head once more, clearly puzzled. "Why would your mind be tired, not your body? I don't get it." Just forget it." The man sighed heavily. "I said I'd take the watch, so why are you here? Is something wrong?" 5 people from our tribe ate the black scorpions. "Again, I told them eating those would kill them. It's been less than a week and they ate them again." The man's face twisted in annoyance. "It was a proud challenge. I was impressed." The woman smiled brightly. "Damn it," the man cursed, sighing deeply. "Just leave the bodies alone. I will deal with them when I am back. Don't go snacking on them during the morning rituals and end up all dead." "But," the woman hesitated. "If you eat them, I'll kill you myself," the man said, clicking his tongue. All right, I won't eat them, I swear." The woman shivered slightly and darted off quickly. Watching her retreating figure, the man sighed once more and couldn't stop himself from cursing. Damn, ignorant barbarians. Eating the black scorpions didn't scare them, even though it would kill them without a doubt, yet they got scared when he threatened them. Those ignorant, foolish people, the man thought. He trod on, his form fatting away into the snowfield. It was snowing. It was a world of pure white, a vast landscape covered entirely in snow. Several carriages made their way across it. Clack, clack. Damn, it's freezing. A man escorting the carriage pulled his fur hat down low. The misty breath leaving his lips froze instantly, turning to frost and dropping to the ground. His eyebrows had frozen too, ready to fall off at the slightest touch. "Wrap up in more fur, or you'll freeze to death." A man who appeared to be the leader spoke stoically, prompting the others to clutch their collars tighter. "Yes, sir." "It's so cold." They replied, teeth clattering. The group pressed forward slowly. Wagon tracks and footprints marked the white snowfield, only to be quickly covered again by the relentless snowfall. One of the men glanced around nervously and spoke up. "Captain, as much as the reward is tempting, this is insane." The captain looked around. Front, back, left, and right, all he saw was white. They were the only color amidst the endless snow. "How are we supposed to cross the white snowfield? This is madness." The man tried to persuade the captain. "Quiet," The captain's voice rang out sharp. All of you agreed to this. Well, yes, but... Then stay quiet. We're nearing the boundary. Damn it. With a muttered curse, the subordinate fell silent again. In truth, they didn't have much energy left for idle conversation. Speaking brought icy air into their lungs, which was painful. In the heavy silence, they moved forward once more. Tusk. Inside the carriage they escorted, an elderly man clicked his tongue. The old man, with a long white beard and dressed in elegant attire, wore a worried expression as he asked, "Are you all right, my lady?" Yes, a young woman nodded, her blue hair swaying. Her dark eyes met his gaze. I'm fine. It's truly a shame you had to endure this journey personally. The old man let out a deep sigh of worry. No, I must be here, she said firmly. It was part of my contract with my father. If you ask me, your father is a bit harsh. He should be more understanding of your efforts to save the family. Damn it, it's so cold. A voice rang out from outside the carriage. The old man's concerned words were cut off by a disgruntled complaint from outside, and his face soured. These rude people, the old man complained. Oh, please don't be too hard on them. They were the only ones willing to escort us across the white snowfield, the young woman said. Well, that may be true, but... By the way, would it be okay to let them inside? They seem to be suffering from the cold. Creak, creak. The carriage shuddered against the cold, as if groaning under the intense chill. Even with the magic barrier protecting the carriage, it was barely holding up. Imagining the conditions outside, the young woman spoke with concern, but the old man rejected her suggestions sternly. No, miss, you know what dwells in this snowfield. You mean the monsters. The monsters in the white snowfield were unimaginably horrifying. While the odds of an encounter are low, we must remain vigilant. That's why we hired these mercenaries as our guards, the old man said. Okay, but... The young woman gazed out the window. All she could see was white, nothing else. Do you think anyone could survive here? That's only a legend. No human could survive in such a place. But it's a credible legend. Well, yes, that's true. The old man didn't outright deny the woman's words. Long ago, in an age almost forgotten, an empire once ruled the world, spanning from the edge of the earth to the seas. But it left the white snowfield untouched. This expanse, covering more than half of the world, lay at the heart of the empire. It was a region of hell from which no one returned. Yet the emperor, determined to control the entire world, wished to conquer the white snowfield. He led the strongest warriors and soldiers into it. Years later, when the empire had fallen, and its emperor was all but forgotten, he returned. He had lost countless soldiers and warriors, returning alone, aged beyond his years. He muttered, like a man driven mad, that the white snowfield was home to monsters, white serpents that devoured glaciers, white bears that caused earthquakes, and ugly rats that polluted the sea. But, he had said, the most dangerous thing in the white snowfield was not the monsters. It was humans. The past emperor said something about barbarians with ash-gray hair and scarred chests, right? The woman asked. Yes, barbarians lived in the white snowfield. It's a mere legend, surely, the old man replied. But the emperor's accounts have been proven correct. Many of the monsters he described were later discovered. After the emperor's death, numerous adventurers entered the white snowfield. Most never returned, but a few survived to share tales that matched the emperor's. Yet, there has been no report of the barbarians, the old man countered. That's true. In all the accounts, there was no mention of these barbarians. It likely was just a delusion of the emperor, my lady, nothing for us to concern ourselves with. The young woman fell silent, agreeing with the old man that it was not their concern. That's when a knock sounded. I think we're approaching the boundary, my lady, the old man said. I see, the woman answered. The old man and the woman tensed. Not all areas of the white snowfield were dangerous. Countless sacrifices later, the regions where monsters lurked had been charted. Crossing into those areas, increased the likelihood of encountering the monsters. The mercenaries' faces tensed up. Their already quiet footsteps became almost inaudible. Just because we're near the boundary doesn't mean we will encounter anything, the captain spoke calmly to boost the mercenaries' morale. If we're careful, we can move without trouble. Even if we do encounter something, most monsters here can be defeated. But if we meet the ones we can't defeat, doesn't that mean we will all die? One of the subordinates asked. I'm afraid so, but there is still a chance of making it through. Move slowly. Clatter, clatter. The wheels creaked softly as they pressed forward, each member tensing, muscles coiled in anticipation, hopping to avoid any signs of color in the white world. However, fate crushed their hopes. Everyone stop, the captain halted abruptly. Something here. What is it? It's hard to make out. The intense cold blurred their vision, revealing only a vague shape. There's good news and bad news, the captain said while squinting. Damn it, just tell us. The good news is that it's small. Countless monsters roamed here, some towering as large as mountains. A monster of human size gave them a fighting chance. The bad news is that it's coming toward us. The captain knew that they couldn't avoid the fight. Curses and the sound of drawn weapons filled the air as each mercenary prepared for a battle. Inside the carriage, the old man and young woman clenched their fists. In the biting cold, their foe slowly drew closer. And at last, in the frigid mist, their foe came into view. The captain, poised to strike, hesitated. Huh? What? Inside the carriage, the woman's eyes widened in shock. The figure before them wasn't a monster. A human, the woman said. Ash-gray hair billowed against the white backdrop. The enemy in front of them had a perfectly sculpted physique and an impressive scar across the chest, as if it had burst open. He wore only a light leather vest, unaffected by the bitter cold. A barbarian, someone whispered. The barbarian, watching them in silence, finally spoke. I was just out for a stroll, hopping to avoid going back, but look at my luck. For a moment, they doubted their ears. The very symbol of savagery standing before them spoke fluently, his ash-gray eyes meeting theirs. Pleased to meet you, the barbarian said. The barbarian had a fluent, impeccably clean speech in the common tongue, devoid of any dialect. The outsiders were too stunned to respond. He cast a quick glance and saw a total of 8 carriages. Are you merchants? The barbarian asked. Yes, came the stuttered reply. Braving the snowfield, you've chosen a perilous path, he said in his deep, resonating voice. The mercenaries hesitated, gripping their swords. They had expected a monster, but were faced with a barbarian spoken of only in legends. The shock of encountering a barbarian was already enough, but his fluent speech only deepened their astonishment. The barbarian, eyeing the mercenaries' attire, spoke again. You appear to be mercenaries hired to protect the merchants. Correct, answered one of the mercenaries. Anyone living in a civilized society knew the concept of merchants and mercenaries. However, the man in front of them was a barbarian, a legendary being who dwelled within this isolated white snowfield. The mercenaries were surprised that a barbarian actually knew the concept of mercenaries and merchants. I would suggest turning back, though I doubt that's an option for you, the barbarian said. He stroked his chin, a tense silence hanging between them. Then, as if reaching a decision, he raised a finger. Your employer is inside one of those carriages, correct? He pointed at a neatly adorned yellow carriage. I would appreciate being hired as well, the barbarian proposed. What did you say? It's not a hard concept. I am offering to help you cross the snowfield. I understand what you're saying, but... The captain trailed off. It was a lot to take in. He couldn't believe a legendary barbarian, engaging in fluent conversation, would suddenly offer his services. However, he managed to collect his thoughts and continued, You have no intention of becoming our enemy. If that were my intention, you'd all be dead already. I see. The captain nodded at the barbarian's nonchalant words. Then he approached the yellow carriage and knocked on the door. Did you hear all that? Yes, the young woman said with a calm voice. The old man inside the carriage was pale, trembling. What on earth is going on? The old man asked. That barbarian seeks to be employed by you. What do you wish to do? The captain asked. The woman inside closed her eyes, paused, and asked softly, If we were to fight, how do you think it would turn out? I wouldn't recommend it. Understood. The woman opened her eyes. Tell that man that we accept his offer. Yes. The captain stepped forward and addressed the barbarian. Your offer has been accepted, barbarian. That's good. The barbarian smiled with satisfaction as he walked toward them. The mercenaries backed away, startled. Do not fear, I am not going to hurt you. You are merely employees. I must speak directly to your employer, the barbarian said. If you try anything. I won't do anything, don't worry. The barbarian responded calmly as he passed the captain. The mercenaries hesitated, unsure if this was a good idea. Captain, is it really wise to let him meet them? Our employer has accepted. Even so, we're mercenaries. Shouldn't we stop him? Stop him? The captain let out a bitter laugh. Do you think we can stop him? You must be joking. As the barbarian approached the carriage, the old man's face turned ashen. Lady, this is, he stammered. Calm yourself, the young woman instructed. Knock, knock. A polite tapping sound was heard, unfitting of a barbarian. The juxtaposition was jarring. May I come in? The barbarian asked. Yes, please enter. Creak. As the door opened, the woman felt momentarily overwhelmed. The barbarian wasn't excessively large, standing about 2 heads taller than an average sturdy man. However, it wasn't his size that struck her. Wearing only a leather vest, his bare muscles were fully on display. Every fiber of his body moved with precision, and he appeared less like a living being and more like a sculpture. He was a monster in human form. No, the old man moaned. He had nowhere left to retreat. The carriage felt suffocatingly small for the 3 of them. I hope you will calm yourselves. I mean no harm, the barbarian said. It's a pleasure to meet you, the woman said. And to you, the barbarian smiled, his dark eyes fixed on the woman. It's quite warm in here. Even indoors, maintaining such warmth in the snowfield must be no small feat. It's thanks to magic. Magic, you say? You mean the mysterious power of your people? I've heard of it before. The barbarian's eyes glimmered with interest. Have you? The woman was taken aback. A barbarian, the embodiment of savagery, was standing before her, speaking in a refined, high-level language. It felt akin to conversing with a well-educated noble. You must know this place is dangerous. Those mercenaries stand little chance of making it through safely. Thus, I offer to safeguard your lives, the barbarian proposed. What do you want in exchange? The woman asked. Her mind raced. She wondered about what he would demand. Is he going to ask for food? Or perhaps weapons? Her thoughts raced as she quickly assessed what she could offer. However, what the barbarian said next was unexpected. Nothing grand, it's very simple actually, he spoke casually. Knowledge. Pardon. Knowledge of the world beyond the snowfield. I want the information that you possess. That's my price. Knowledge and information, that's it. Yes, I think it's a good deal on your part. He smiled slyly. At that moment, the woman nearly lost control of herself. Even his mere smile made her feel like she was standing naked before a predator. All right, she nodded slowly, forcing herself to remain composed. Good, the barbarian grinned in satisfaction. May I know your name? I am Milena of the Akasha family. My name is Kettle, pleased to have made your acquaintance. Finally, someone I can actually converse with, Kettle thought. He breathed a sigh of relief. Most humans he encountered panicked and brandished their blades at the mere sight of him. He had tried countless times to communicate, but most were too terrified to listen. This one, however, was calm, something he found deeply reassuring. I just wanted a brief stroll. I didn't think I would be this lucky. He couldn't fathom why people willingly entered this cursed snowfield. but those from beyond its borders occasionally made their way inside. Since there was no way out, whatever information he could extract from these outsiders was invaluable. After talking with those ignorant barbarians for so long, speaking with a civilized person feels almost like therapy. Kettle bombarded Milena with questions. He asked about the happenings outside the snowfield, how the nations interacted, and the current affairs of the world. The more questions she answered, the more perplexed she became. For a being said to dwell in legends, the barbarians' questions were far too specific. I see. After hearing Milena's answers, Kettle nodded. So, even beyond, peace is elusive. Yes, the Empire and Kingdom are at war, Milena answered. The world was embroiled in conflict. A powerful empire and the largest kingdom were engaged in a war threatening to consume all. The empire, with its overwhelming resources, is slowly advancing, but the kingdom is holding on thanks to the swordmaster and heroes at the border, she continued. Swordmaster, heroes, Kettle's eyes lit up with interest. Are they strong? Yes, beyond human comprehension, Milena replied. One of them even slew a dragon. A dragon, you say, Kettle murmured. The words swordmaster and dragon all felt like fantasy. He wondered what a real dragon would look like. Would it resemble a serpent or a lizard? I would like to see one, he said longingly. There was a fantastical world beyond the snowfield. He no longer remembered how long he had been trapped in this accursed land. He had only fought to survive, knowing this place was a snowfield in a fantasy world, and that escape was impossible. He yearned to see what was beyond the snowfield, a world of fantasy. Milena suddenly shivered and said, Wait, you're not thinking of. She wondered if this barbarian was planning to attack the outside world. She also wondered if that was why he sought information about their strongest figures and their secrets. The thought sent chills down her spine. You are a barbarian, correct? She asked cautiously. So you say. Judging by your expression, it seems you know of me. Yes, there are legends about you people. Legends. Milena recounted what she knew. Hearing it, Kettle chuckled. So that's how the story goes, an emperor. That guy was an emperor. I thought he was just a madman, Kettle thought with a chuckle. Come again. Never mind, Kettle shook his head. Your legends may be accurate. There was a man that came here long ago. Is that so? To hear validation from a legend itself left Milena in awe. She missed a key detail in Kettle's words. He spoke as if recounting events from thousands of years ago. The longer their conversation went on, the less wary Milena became. She even dared to ask some questions of her own. It seems you know much of our language and knowledge. Long ago, a few tried to cross this snowfield. When I met them, they were all about to die. In exchange for saving them, I learned much about your world. I am not sure if they made it back. Most likely not, Milena said. Had they returned, tales of a knowledgeable barbarian would have spread. That's a shame. But his refined speech and vast knowledge seemed beyond what mere exchanges could explain. Unless he had dedicated himself fully to learning things about the outside world, his expertise felt unattainable. After a pause, Kettle asked, I'm assuming you're trying to transport some sort of a weapon, right? Oh yes, how did you? The carriages give off the unmistakable sound of sharpened steel. I see. Milena was very confused. They were currently in the white snowfield. The harsh winds made it nearly impossible to talk to someone, even if they were right beside each other. Furthermore, the carriages were sealed tightly. No sound should have escaped. Judging by the number of carriages, you're carrying quite the load. Why choose this route? He asked. We need the money. Milena bit her lip. Her family, which had traded for generations, was now deep in debt due to recent schemes and disruptions. They were on the brink of collapse. This journey was their desperate bid for survival. Kettle understood her reasoning. You intend to sell weapons to the kingdom at war with the Empire. Huh, Milena's eyes widened. She had never mentioned their destination. How did you? There are only 2 nations that would want such quantities, Kettle spoke nonchalantly. The Empire or the Kingdom, but you said the Empire had no supply issues. That leaves only one option. Milena stared at him dumbfounded. Supply and demand. If the supply is scarce, prices rise. I'm not familiar with outside values, but that seems like a worthwhile investment, Kettle said. Milena blinked in astonishment. Since you said you had to cross the snowfield, I can only assume that there is no other route to the kingdom. Does it border the Empire? Kettle asked. Correct. It was a perfect deduction. Even so, it's very dangerous to cross this path. Who are you? Milena asked, beyond shocked. Is he really a barbarian? Before she could ask, the carriage halted, and the roar of a monster echoed outside. It seems we have an uninvited guest, Kettle muttered quietly. Glug. A grotesque sound reached their ears. The mercenaries' faces hardened as they drew their weapons and braced themselves. Hold! The captain raised a hand, halting the mercenaries. Through the harsh cold, a monster emerged. A mass of black, viscous slime came into view. Black slime, Milena whispered, her voice tight with unease. Is that what you people call that monster? Kettle asked. Yes, it's a monster documented in our records. Many people had dared to cross the white snowfield, though few survived. Among those who lived, some had documented the creatures they encountered, and black slime was among the most frequently noted. Are you familiar with it, Kettle? Milena asked. Of course, they are quite chewy and make for a decent snack. You eat them. Milena wondered if she had misheard, but Kettle's expression remained perfectly serious. Would you care to try? I can fetch one for you. And no, Milena quickly shook her head. Glug. The black slime inched closer, its hostility clear, making the mercenaries' nerves tense up. So, Kettle, about the black slime, Milena said while turning to him. Yet Kettle remained leaning casually against the carriage, eyes fixed on the window. His lack of intention to move startled Milena. Kettle, I have entered into a contract with you to protect your life, but there is no need for me to intervene when it isn't necessary, Kettle said. Pardon. Your men are more than sufficient for this task, then Kettle murmured quietly. Besides, I want to see how strong the outside people are. Glug. The black slime lunged forward. Shield up, the captain yelled an order. Yes, sir. A mercenary wielding a two-handed shield stepped forward with forceful resolve, grounding himself with strength in his legs and core as the black slime charged. Thud. Ugh! The shield-bearer was flung backward and rolled across the ground. Another mercenary struck down at the black slime with his sword. Clang. Arg. The recoil sent the sword flying back. The mercenary steadied himself, staring at his weapon in disbelief. The blade was chipped where it had struck the black slime. What is this? Glug. The black slime attacked again, forcing the mercenaries to dodge. The captain shouted out more orders. Black slime can only move in a straight line. Circle around it and get ready to counterattack. Why, yes, sir. Don't face it head-on. Deflect its attack. Following their captain's orders, the mercenaries quickly adapted their formation, surrounding the creature. Thud. Ahi. The shield-bearer was pushed back, but managed to stay on his feet, twisting his body to absorb the black slime's attack. Simple attacks won't work. Aim for the core hidden somewhere inside, the captain yelled. Understood. The mercenaries fought with all their might. Around 30 minutes had passed. Ha! The captain drove his sword deep into a tiny gap in the black slime. Glug. The black slime dissolved into a pool of goo. They had won. The mercenaries erupted into cheers. We did it. We won. Milena clenched her fist inside the carriage, celebrating alongside them. They had defeated a formidable monster of the white snowfield with their own strength. It was an undeniable victory. Yet Kettle continued to observe with the same calm expression. I have a question, he asked. Yes. How strong are these mercenaries? They are quite skilled. Taking a job to enter the white snowfield was no small feat. Only those with the utmost confidence would dare to take on such a mission. They are well known across the continent, Milena replied. I see. Kettle's gaze turned contemplative. They continued their journey, facing more monsters that occasionally blocked their path. The mercenaries fought with all their might, taking down each monster they encountered. They were not sure if it was luck or their abundant records, but the monsters they faced were all known entities. With their precise targeting of the monsters, weaknesses, and vital points, they managed to prevail more easily than expected. Is this it? The white snowfield isn't so bad after all. As the mercenaries gained confidence, their tension gradually eased. Advancing without a single casualty boosted their spirits. This isn't so tough, don't you think so, Captain? Stay vigilant, we still have more than halfway to go. But we haven't faced any serious issues yet, right? Maybe the dangers of the white snowfield are exaggerated. One of the mercenaries voiced his skepticism. No official expeditions have entered here since the Emperor's legend, most due to caution and fear. The legend surrounding the Emperor was well known, deterring even the most ambitious from challenging the snowfield. They knew that the danger of the white snowfield was undeniable, but it seemed to be exaggerated. The mercenaries began to believe they were capable of conquering it. Their view of the barbarian began to shift as well, from a legendary being to just another weak barbarian. Don't you guys think that guy is a bit annoying? One of them muttered. They had been forced to endure the harsh cold outside for the sake of vigilance. Without their magically enhanced coats, they would have frozen to death long ago. Yet the barbarian rested comfortably inside the warm carriage. He even slept soundly in a spare carriage, never once lifting a finger in battle. Though the barbarian was contracted with the same employer, just as they were, his treatment was vastly different from theirs. He was being treated like a noble. It irked them to no end. Is he really that strong? One of the mercenaries asked. Their doubts grew stronger. I don't think that barbarian is that strong. All this talk about legendary barbarians, maybe it's all just tales. Maybe he is clinging to us for survival. Their doubts hardened into near certainty. Enough, the captain said. His terse command silenced the other mercenaries. The employer made this decision. It's not our place to interfere. So you're saying the employer has been fooled? One of the mercenaries narrowed his eyes. At the very least, shouldn't we verify his skills? Don't be ridiculous. The captain dismissed the idea, but the mercenaries' dissatisfaction lingered. Meanwhile, Kettle contentedly bit into an apple, seemingly oblivious to their mutterings. This apple is really good, Kettle said. I'm glad it suits your taste, the old man replied. Storing fresh fruit on such a long journey must be difficult. Did you preserve it with magic? Yes. Magic is truly remarkable. Kettle devoured the apple down to the core, leaving no trace. The old man beside him watched in a mix of awe and revulsion. Kettle licked the juice from his fingers with satisfaction. It had been too long since he last tasted fresh fruit. After subsisting on monster meat, the sweet taste was refreshing. His desire to leave the snowfield grew stronger. As if remembering something, Kettle spoke up. There is something I'm curious about. What is it? Milena asked. Your attire, your posture, and even your manner of speech. They all suggest you are more than a simple representative of a merchant family. Milena's clothing appeared simple at first glance, but upon closer look, its quality was unmistakably high. Milena nodded. I am Milena, daughter of Veliaka, the second wife of Kesak Akesh. Your mother is a consort, so you're the daughter of a consort. Yes, she married into the family for a political alliance, only to be discarded and stripped of any power. I see, Kettle nodded thoughtfully. Milena hesitated before continuing. My mother and I, we are family in name only. In reality, we are little more than servants. She hadn't intended to say so much, but Kettle's seemingly detached interest encouraged her to keep speaking. Didn't you mention your family is in decline? Kettle asked. Yes, Aggressive competition from other merchant families has taken away our trade partners. At this rate, we will soon be ruined. Her father, the head of their family, had been paralyzed by fear and hesitated to act, ceding ground until ruin seemed inevitable. This trade mission is critical for our family's survival, she said. Selling their weapons to the kingdom embroiled in war would bring enough capital to revive their household. I see, Kettle appeared to understand. But one thing puzzles me. Even if you have no real power, you are still of noble blood. Was it truly necessary for you to undertake this journey personally? This was my choice. Yours. Yes, someone had to set an example by taking on the life-risking journey. My lady. The old man looked at Milena with tear-filled eyes. Her act embodied the true spirit of noblesse. I see, Kettle nodded. You're quite intelligent and ambitious. What? And quite greedy too, might I add. You fool, who do you think you are? The old man yelled. The old man failed to grasp Kettle's words, but Milena's eyes widened. You wait. However, before Milena could finish her sentence, there was a knock on the door. Knock, knock. The old man slowly rose to open it. What is it? The old man asked. We have a message for the lady. The mercenaries stood waiting outside. What is the matter? Milena asked. I need to confirm something. We mercenaries have signed a formal contract with you and are carrying out this request officially. Is this correct? One of the mercenaries asked. Yes, that's right. I am always grateful that you accepted my request, Milena said with a nod. The mission was to cross the white snowfield. All other mercenaries had fled upon hearing the details of the mission. Without these mercenaries, it would have been impossible to even attempt crossing the snowfield. We are risking our lives for this task. I understand that since it's written in our contract, the mercenary said. He narrowed his eyes. But there is one thing that bothers me. It's about that barbarian. His gaze shifted to Kettle. That barbarian received the same request as us, so why is he receiving special treatment? The mercenary asked. Oh, only then did Milena grasp the source of the mercenaries' discontent. It was true that the mercenaries and Kettle had accepted the same request. Yet, while the barbarian rested comfortably inside the carriage, the mercenaries braved the freezing snowfield, facing monsters. It was inevitable for resentment to build. I am sorry, I didn't consider your position. Milena bowed apologetically. No, it's not something you need to apologize for, my lady. Of course, I understand the special treatment for a legendary figure like the barbarian, but we just need to confirm something. Confirm what? Milena asked. That barbarian has not fought even once, has he? So that's what this is about. Milena's expression hardened. We are faithfully fulfilling the mission we were hired for because we have the skills to do so. But how can we know if that barbarian is actually strong? The mercenaries had started doubting whether the barbarian was merely a being at the bottom of the food chain, surviving this harsh snowfield day by day. They were curious about Kettle's strength and whether he could even kill one monster by himself. That was the essence of their question. So, you want to see my skills? How do you intend to confirm how strong I am? Kettle said with a smile. I will be the one to test you. One of the mercenaries patted his chest. He was one of the elites in their group. After discussing with the others, it was decided that he would be the one to test Kettle. Milena looked to the captain, who shook his head regretfully. I tried to dissuade him, but he wouldn't listen. And frankly, he's not wrong, the captain explained. It was a reasonable request to test Kettle's strength. The decision now lay with Kettle. I don't mind fighting you, but it will have to be at another time, Kettle said with a laugh. What? The mercenary's face twisted. Are you going to run away like a coward? I'm not fleeing. Circumstances won't allow me to fight you. Circumstances, my ass. The mercenary was certain that the barbarian was weak, and that he was just a worm crawling at the bottom of the food chain in this snowfield. Even Milena was surprised. If Kettle was strong, he had no reason to refuse the fight. So you've been deceiving us all along. Come out, you coward. The mercenary grabbed Kettle's shoulder, intent on dragging him out by force. But as he tightened his grip, his expression stiffened. What? He could not move him. It wasn't merely a matter of weight or resistance. It felt as if he was trying to uproot a tree that had stood unmoved for centuries. Calmly, Kettle stepped out of the carriage on his own. The situation evoked no change in his emotions, just like how no one frets over ants crawling at their feet. The mercenaries stepped back nervously. I can't fight you, because we have another uninvited guest, Kettle said. What nonsense. The mercenary desperately tried to maintain control. I see that a pitiful assembly of mortals from the outside world has arrived. A thunderous voice echoed across the snowfield. The mercenaries' bodies froze instantly. The deafening sound approached slowly. It was more than a voice. It was as if nature itself moved. I haven't had a rare delicacy in years. A chilling laugh pierced everyone's ears. Their heads turned slowly. The snowstorm parted, revealing the being. It had the shape of a serpent, but it was no ordinary serpent. It was the white serpent. Its scales were lined with black stripes, and it flicked its forked tongue as it stared at them. The serpent's appearance was similar to that of a regular serpent. There was nothing particularly unique about it, except for its size. Its eyes alone were large enough to engulf them all. The length of its body stretched beyond the horizon, hidden by the snowfield. The word large could not fully describe the size of the serpent. It was vast enough to coil around mountains and reach across seas. It's the white serpent, one of the mercenaries murmured. It was the monster from the Emperor's Chronicles, the white serpent that devoured glaciers. Everyone froze. Their limbs refused to move, like mice caught in a predator's gaze. No, one of the mercenaries. Pants started to get wet as fear engulfed his mind. Scream for me, mortals, the serpent mocked them. Spill your foul fluids and beg for your lives. Turn tail and flee on trembling legs. Your pitiful struggle will only make the flavor richer. Rumble. The ground started to shake. The serpent's mere motion triggered a quake. Death loomed inevitably. An undeniable truth crushed their spirits as they abandoned hope. Enough, a composed voice rang out. It was calm and unconcerned, as if belonging to someone strolling through a park. These are my guests. The speaker was none other than Kettle. He stepped forward slowly. Return, serpent, Kettle ordered. You, the serpent's voice wavered. This embodiment of nature itself trembled before Kettle. Why are you here? That is none of your concern. Kettle advanced with steady steps, causing the enormous serpent to recoil. I have taken on a mission, and the mission is to protect them, so leave now. Have you forgotten the rules of the snowfield? Once beyond your tribe's land, I told you that's none of your business. Kettle frowned. The serpent hesitated, its tongue flicking nervously. That. The massive serpent, which should have dwarfed the barbarian, visibly cowered before him. It was unmistakable, even to ordinary humans. The monster was afraid. Do not mock me, the serpent roared. It refused to acknowledge its own fear, raising its head fiercely. I am the serpent of the snowfield, you barbarian. How dare you, a mere mortal, command me, a being of eternal power? The serpent charged. Its massive body surged forward toward the group, mouth agape. The frozen earth screamed under its weight, and a tempest rose in its wake. Lake. It was as if a mountain were charging toward them. The mercenaries collapsed in terror, closing their eyes against the oncoming collision. Then I'll have to teach you a lesson, clenched his fist calmly. He stepped forward, twisted his body, and threw a punch. A tiny fist met the colossal serpent's charge. A shockwave erupted. The mercenaries couldn't even scream. They clamped their hands over their ears as the deafening roar threatened to rupture their eardrums. The shockwave hurled them across the ground. My lady. Even the carriage was not spared. It shook violently as Milena clung desperately to its walls. Ugh. When the shockwave finally subsided, they cautiously opened their eyes. Their pupils widened in disbelief. The perpetual blizzard of the white snowfield had vanished. The air was clear, revealing the horizon. And there, in the sky, floated the serpent's head. Reeling as if struck by an immense force, it tumbled through the air before crashing to the ground. Boom! A deep rumble resonated across the snowfield. Why do you always listen after getting beaten up? Kettle dusted off his hands, standing unfazed. Kettle, give me a moment, I need to finish this. It won't take long. Kettle stomped, and the ground split. In an instant, he was a blur racing toward the serpent's head. Boom! The impact resounded like the world itself was splitting. The mercenaries watched in stunned silence. From that point on, the mercenaries had nothing more to say about the barbarian. Whenever Kettle approached them, they averted their gazes in fear. I am sorry. There is no need. Trusting a stranger isn't easy. I understand, Kettle said. Please spare me. I've committed a grave sin. No matter what Kettle said, they continued to grovel. Unable to hold a conversation, Kettle went back to his carriage, shaking his head. The mercenaries struck down the remaining monsters without saying anything and pressed onward on their journey. After defeating the white serpent, Kettle leisurely rested in the carriage, while the old man volunteered to keep watch outside. Finally, they reached the end of the snowfield. Oh, it's grass. Beyond the snowy expanse, they saw green vegetation. The mercenaries let out cheers. They had conquered the white snowfield. We've arrived, Kettle remarked calmly. Thank you, Kettle, Milena bowed respectfully. What will you do for the return journey? We are going to take the route within the Empire. After you sell your weapons, you will be empty-handed. Passing the border won't be too difficult, Kettle remarked. Yes. Kettle saw through everything in an instant. Milena looked at Kettle with a complicated expression. She hesitated for a moment, then said, Kettle, you once said I was clever and ambitious. However, when Kettle said that, a mercenary had interrupted their conversation, so she hadn't heard the full meaning. What did you mean by that? I meant exactly what I said. You are intelligent and ambitious. Kettle casually bit into an unpeeled orange. Your family, once renowned, is now weakened due to a lack of capital. Naturally, the retainer's loyalty has wavered. A merchant family was built on wealth. Without it, they would lose everything. You're on the brink of ruin. Now you have to ask yourself the questions. Will you wait passively for the destruction of your family or take action to carve out a future? Who will your retainers follow? Kettle continued. The answer was obvious to him. Kettle swallowed the orange whole. You said you are the daughter of a concubine. That gives you legitimacy but also closeness with the lower ranks. Am I wrong? But I lack actual power. Milena's gaze wavered. Power comes from the trust and loyalty of your followers. If you save your family through this journey, you will become its savior. Selling these weapons would bring enough wealth to restore her family's fortune. Your subordinates will support you over your father or siblings. Things will unfold from there. Correct me if I am wrong, Kettle said. No. It was a perfect analysis. Milena shivered. It felt like he had read her mind. What else does the barbarian know? I wonder what lays hidden within his thoughts, Milena thought. Right on the mark, Kettle thought. He savored his internal triumph. History was full of stories of those who risked everything to gain power. Kettle had read countless tales, and Milena's situation fit them perfectly. Experiencing it in person was exhilarating. With a grin, Kettle spoke. Even so, risking your life for ambition is honorable. Everything that has happened is because of your own abilities and determination. You should be proud of yourself. Milena narrowed her eyes. Kettle was intelligent. Not just a little, but he was far beyond the self-proclaimed clever people with shallow educations. And then there was his strength. He defeated the white serpent without a scratch. The merchant's daughter, Milena, felt greed flash in her eyes. By any chance, have you considered leaving the snowfield? From what I've heard, you seem quite curious about the outside world, she proposed. Well, that's true. Kettle had asked Milena many questions about the outside world. His interest was intense, far beyond simple curiosity. If that's the case, how about joining me? She asked. Milena was a merchant, and a merchant could not let an opportunity slip by. I can offer you a lot of knowledge, anything you desire. I can help you taste all the pleasures of the world. That is indeed a very tempting offer. In truth, Kettle was genuinely enticed. He wanted to leave the white snowfield immediately and experience the ordinary fantasy world. He wanted to experience the world of dragons, elves, swords, and magic. The wonder he had always dreamed of was right before him. Yet Kettle shook his head. Sorry, but that's impossible. I still have things to do here, he said. Things to do. Yes, I might consider your offer when I've finished everything, but not now. I see. After a moment's hesitation, Milena reached for the back of her neck, pulling out a necklace. She broke it off with a firm tug. Then, please accept this. It had a small wooden carving. If you ever leave the snowfield and seek out the Akasha family, show them this. If it's a gift, I will accept it gladly. Kettle didn't refuse the necklace. Milena bowed deeply. Thank you so much for everything, Kettle. I hope we meet again someday. The carriages left the snowfield. Kettle silently watched their departure. As they traveled further, Milena turned back for one last glance. The bitter cold of the snowfield had already swallowed the barbarian from sight. Kettle still didn't know what had happened to him or how he had ended up here. When he woke up, he had become a barbarian in the snowfield and had no time to figure out why he was stranded in the white snowfield. The cold was so harsh that his breath turned to frost. Even staying warm was impossible, let alone growing crops. Fires died out almost instantly, extinguished by the relentless, freezing winds. That wasn't the end of it, though. The only things that existed here were endlessly strong and terrifying monsters. Nightmarish creatures charged at him, intent on killing and devouring him. Survival was the only priority. There was no room for anything else. He fought desperately to stay alive. He killed monsters and draped himself in their raw hides. He drank the warm blood before it froze. He roamed through various places with his tribe. Once things had stabilized somewhat, he finally had a moment to take in his surroundings. Occasionally, humans from the outside world came and revealed what lay beyond the white snowfield. Through these encounters, he realized that he had indeed arrived in the fantasy world he had always dreamed of and longed for. Beyond this nightmarish snowfield lay a world of wonder and fantasy. He wanted to get out of here immediately, but he couldn't. This cursed expanse of snow imposed a powerful restriction. Until he resolved that restriction, he could not leave. So he gave it his all to get rid of the constraint. On the other side was the fantasy he had longed for. His purpose was clear. His top priority wasn't survival anymore, and he acted decisively, crushing monsters and breaking down the restrictions one by one. In the process, he lived a life that far exceeded the length of his previous one. In the midst of striving for survival and the constant struggle, the past held no significance. Ordinary people would have long forgotten past memories and fully become a barbarian of the snowfield. However, Kettle was different. He had a singular purpose, to travel through the world of fantasy. Even as time passed and tried its best to make him forget about his past life, he never lost sight of that goal. Finally, after overcoming all hardships and trials, he was ready. I'm here. Barbarian Kettle stepped onto the green grass. Seeing greenery again after so long nearly brought him to tears. Kettle inhaled deeply. Scents from kilometers around flooded his senses, overwhelming his lungs. The fragrance of grass, the scent of animals, and the smell of rivers were all the things he could never have experienced in the white snowfield. Perfect, just perfect, Kettle said, smiling broadly. He reached out and touched a nearby leaf. The rough texture brought him joy. Ha! He felt almost delirious with happiness. Kettle grabbed a handful of wild grass and stuffed it into his mouth. Common sense told him that most wild plants were poisonous, but he didn't care. Even the venom of a spider that corrupted eternal ice hadn't poisoned him. Wild plants were nothing as the defense mechanism of ordinary plants posed no threat to him. He chewed on the grass. It was bitter and tasted horrible, but he was still happy. Hee. Laughing, he dug into the earth under a tree. His hand was filled with soil each time he dug the ground. He gnawed at the tree roots without hesitation. If there were another person nearby, they would think that he was insane, but Kettle didn't care. He kept grinning like a madman. Perfect, just perfect. He had escaped that wretched, snowy expanse. He had always wanted to leave, but the cursed system had blocked his way. Damn the system, he murmured. He glanced at the space in front of him. There, visible only to him, floated a system window. Quest 784 completed. You have acquired the reward. You have met the condition. You may leave the white snowfield. For ages, he had been trapped by that cursed quest. Any attempt to leave was met by a strange force that stopped him. But now it was over. He had fulfilled every condition. He had escaped the snowfield. Rot in hell, snowfield, I am never coming back, he shouted. He raised his middle finger high toward the snowy mountains. Ha ha ha. He couldn't stop laughing. He had heard stories from the occasional visitors to the white snowfield that this was indeed a world of fantasy. It was a place he had dreamed of, but thought he could never reach. That fact alone gave him the drive to keep going. Although he was no longer a young boy, his heart was just as excited as if he still were. The starting point wasn't exactly what he dreamed of, but he had persevered and survived. The only thing left now was for him to enjoy this world. There were countless things he wanted to encounter: swords, magic, dragons, and elves. He was planning on enjoying every last bit of this world. Without that longing, he would have died long ago. The white snowfield was akin to hell, where one could not endure with mere survival instincts. Kettle started to walk leisurely. He could rush through a forest like this in an instant, but for now, he relished this simple walk. However, even after a long walk, the forest didn't end. How far does it go? He wondered to himself aloud. Even in his freedom, his desire to meet people remained as strong as ever. Finally, he abandoned his leisurely pace and expanded his senses. He began to detect numerous things, such as rustling leaves, wild animals breathing, and fish flicking their fins in a stream. However, what caught his attention was the presence of other humans, many of them. Oh, Kettle felt the presence of a gathering place. He wondered if it was some sort of a village. His face lit up. Will I finally see a civilized village? His companions in the snowfield so far had been crude brutes who dug into the snow for makeshift shelters. He had argued for proper lodging, but the other tribe members stood there with confused expressions, unable to understand. Kettle missed organized human villages. What would be a good first greeting? Should I just say hello? Or should I go in a more traditional way and ask what language they speak first? Kettle thought excitedly. Whatever he chose, he resolved to be polite. With anticipation, he moved on. A blue dome of light formed in the forest. Several elves lowered their hands, their expressions relieved. It's done, Elder, an elf said. Yes, well done. The elderly elf smiled with satisfaction and called out, Everyone, this is our new home. Hurrah! The gathered elves erupted in cheers, some even shedding tears. They had fled from slave hunters, constantly evading capture, until they finally arrived here, in a remote place untouched by humans. Settle your belongings and build our dwellings, the elderly elf said. Yes. The elves set to work, weaving branches into homes. The elder watched, eyes filled with contentment. Then a young elf approached cautiously and said, Sir. Yes, the elder responded. Is this place truly safe? It is, the elder's voice brimmed with confidence. This is an extreme wilderness. Humans cannot reach us. We've confirmed there are no traces of human presence. I understand, but, the young elf murmured. He knew the exact reason why there was no human presence nearby. This place is in close proximity to the white snowfield. The elder chuckled, having realized the source of the young elf's concern. You're worried about the monsters of the snow, right? They're too close, the young elf replied. The white snowfield was a place where the world's most fearsome and powerful creatures gathered. Yet, the elves' newly chosen home was just hours away on foot from such a dangerous place. The young elf was understandably afraid. However, the elder shook his head reassuringly. There is no need to worry. Nothing has come out of the white snowfield for thousands of years, and we have the barrier for added safety. It was a barrier that obscured their presence and made the forest appear ordinary. After months of work, using ancient elven techniques, they had finally created this protective dome. With it in operation, no outsiders could approach. And even if the monsters come, we have our queen, the elder explained. Ah, the young elf felt relieved. It was their rightful queen who appeared after centuries of hardships, a powerful figure who would be etched in the history of the elves. You're right, she is protecting us. Yes, no monster, no matter how fierce, can stand against our queen. So worry not, the elder spoke with certainty. Did I tear something? Kettle tilted his head in confusion. It felt like he had brushed against something, but he wasn't sure. The sensation had been too subtle. If even his senses found it confusing, it probably wasn't worth worrying about. He shifted his focus. As he approached the source of the human presence he had sensed earlier, he soon saw a figure. Out of habit, Kettle hid his presence. It was an instinct ingrained in him since the white snowfield days. When he approached the figure, his eyes widened. An elf, Kettle thought. The pointed ears were the first thing he noticed and were a dead giveaway. He looked like a human, but Kettle knew he wasn't a human. He had pointed ears, strikingly beautiful facial features, and was wearing simple cloth garments. It definitely was an elf. Ah, Kettle exhaled softly, a note of happiness in his breath. Elves were among the most iconic races in any fantasy world. He hadn't expected to meet one so soon. The seemingly lost young elf looked around nervously, his ears twitching like a rabbit's. Oh wow, it's a real elf, Kettle thought excitedly. Kettle had read so many books on elves, but this was his first time seeing one. Tears pricked at his eyes, moved by the sight. I'm so glad I survived, Kettle murmured. This single encounter felt like a reward for all his past hardships. The elf hadn't noticed him yet and continued to wander. Kettle slowly closed the distance. Huh, the young elf muttered. When they were close enough to touch, the elf suddenly tensed, ears twitching again. Then his gaze landed on Kettle. Kettle instinctively grew tense. It was their first encounter. He raised his hand slowly and said, "Hello." The elf stared at him, dumbfounded, craning his neck to look up at him. Then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed. Kettle caught the unconscious elf. He scratched his cheek, not knowing what to do. Kettle was massive and the elf barely reached his knee. From the elf's perspective, such a sudden encounter had to have been terrifying enough to faint. That's a shame, Kettle said. Kettle's first encounter with an elf hadn't gone as planned. Cradling the elf, Kettle turned toward the village. He decided to think in a more positive way. He could be seen as a kind stranger returning a lost child. Legends varied, but elves were generally known as a peaceful and orderly race. As long as they weren't hostile, he could receive a warm welcome. The thought of elven hospitality was thrilling. With a spring in his steps, Kettle walked toward the village. Kettle soon arrived at the elf village. However, what greeted him was far from what he had anticipated. Ugh. There's a human here, of all places. No, my baby. Numerous gasps of horror and hostile glares were directed at Kettle. He looked back at them with a bewildered expression. This isn't what I expected. The elves were undoubtedly beautiful. Each one of them was more stunning than anything Kettle had ever seen. Even those with age-lined faces possessed flawless features. Under normal circumstances, he would have been awed and moved, but now was not the time for admiration. The elves were clearly hostile toward him. My baby! A woman cried out with a grief-stricken expression as she saw her child in Kettle's arms. At that moment, Kettle realized their misunderstanding. They thought he was a stranger who had kidnapped the child. The village elder gazed at the child, in Kettle's arms with a sorrowful expression. "This cannot be," the elder exclaimed. This place was supposed to be an untouched haven, beyond the reach of any human, yet a human was standing before them. Though his build was exceptionally large, there was no doubt he was human. "But how? There should have been a barrier," the elder shouted. "Elder, the barrier, it has cracks," one of the elves said. Damnation. Their location had been exposed. The elder gritted his teeth. The barrier was created with the secret arts of ancient elves. It was not something that could be breached easily. If it was broken, it meant humans had prepared thoroughly. Since when were they tracking us? No, there is no time to ponder that now, the elder thought. He quickly turned to others to warn them. "Where is the queen? Humans will be upon us soon." The queen has briefly left to scout the surrounding area. Of all times, misfortune was piling up on them. Overhearing their conversation, Kettle scratched his cheek. Though they were some distance away, he heard them clearly as if they were speaking right beside him. So they think I'm a kidnapper, Kettle thought. He understood why they were so hostile toward him. They were elves, and he was a human. Stories of humans kidnapping elves, bewitched by their beauty, were well known. Holding a young elf in his arms certainly would make him look like a kidnapper. He needed to clear up this misunderstanding. "I am not your enemy. I am." However, Kettle was interrupted. "You scoundrel! If you do not return the child, we will hunt you to your death," the elder shouted. Kettle's words were cut off without mercy. Whatever he said, they had no intention of listening. In that case, he would have to show them through actions. By now, the child in his arms had awoken and was trembling. Kettle gently set the child down and said, "Go on, return to your people." He offered a bright smile. Seeing his face, the child couldn't hold back his tears. "Wah!" the child cried out and ran toward the village. Kettle felt deeply saddened. Is my face that frightening? Kettle thought. Regardless, he had returned the child. Kettle stood upright and raised his hands. "Elves, as you can see, I am not your." He released the hostage. "Everyone attack." Without hesitation, the elves released the bowstrings they had been holding taut. Arrows whistled through the air, all aimed at Kettle. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The arrows struck Kettle, but bounced off harmlessly. Undeterred, the elves continued to pull their bowstrings. "He is wearing some sort of a protective artifact. It must have its limits. Keep attacking," an elf shouted. It wasn't just arrows now. Flaming spheres and blades of water flew at him. Kettle lowered his head, looking dejected. "Elves are more savage than I thought," Kettle thought sadly. These elves were far from the peaceful, nature-loving race he had imagined. In reality, the elves were more violent and ruthless than he could have guessed. So this is the true nature of the elves. Of course, it made sense to Kettle. Elves lived in nature, a realm where survival of the fittest was the cardinal rule. Peace was a luxury they couldn't afford. Their ferocity, then, was understandable. Fine, Kettle decided to accept it without prejudice. After all, this was the fantasy world he had always dreamed of. Finding differences from the books would be part of the adventure. An arrow flew toward him, which he caught with his hand. The tip of the arrow shimmered, spinning with a faint wind energy. Elemental magic, Kettle was surprised. Flaming orbs and water blades continued to soar through the air. Kettle's eyes lit up with curiosity. Strange forces like these were well known in the white snowfield he hailed from. However, Kettle was thrilled to see elven elemental magic in person. Watching their attacks with fascination, Kettle made the elves tremble with disbelief. What kind of artifact could possibly deflect all our attacks? The elder thought in disbelief. Even the most robust protective artifact had limits to how much it could withstand. Yet, despite all of their combined efforts, his artifact showed no sign of breaking. Kettle contemplated. While it was somewhat amusing to watch, he wanted to have a real conversation. However, these elves clearly weren't interested in listening. I suppose I need to calm things down first. Kettle raised both arms. The elves, mistaking it for an offensive move, cast protective spells around themselves. Kettle clapped his hands. A wave of air pressure erupted. Boom. Aya. Gah. The protective spells shattered like fragile glass. Trees bent and leaves scattered, flying far off into the distance. Elves unable to withstand it were thrown to the ground. A single clap was all it took to end the battle. What is this? The elves were dumbfounded. Their opponent didn't use any magic, it was pure physical strength. A clap had created a pressure wave that overturned everything. Oops, Kettle said. He too was taken aback. Did I overdo it? He was used to facing either powerful monsters or pitifully weak ones, so he wasn't quite sure how to control his strength. However, like it or not, things had calmed down. Kettle cleared his throat and began speaking again. I am not your enemy, elves. Just then, a sharp wind sound pierced the air. A translucent arrow shot straight for Kettle. It moved beautifully, and Kettle watched, entranced. Boom. The arrow struck him and exploded in a burst of flame, engulfing him. An elf descended into the midst of the battlefield. Her golden hair swayed, revealing sharp eyes with blue irises. The elves cheered. Yes. It's the queen. What's going on here? The queen asked calmly. The elder approached her, breathless. A human has attacked us. So it's come to that. The queen's eyes darkened. Nowhere is safe anymore. He is only the vanguard. The main force will soon arrive, the elder said. What? She looked puzzled. I've scouted the entire area. There's no trace of humans. What? The elder was confused. See, this is why. A voice emerged from the flames. The elves recoiled. Soon, a hand emerged, brushing the fire aside. I'd appreciate it if you would listen. Kettle shook off the flames, unharmed. Impossible, an elf exclaimed. What kind of artifact is he wearing? Another elf joined in. Artifact, the queen's eyes narrowed. Kettle only wore light clothing, an axe at his waist, a wooden necklace, and a small leather pouch hung at his belt. If there had been a protective artifact, she would have sensed it. He had survived her attack purely on his own strength. Even a strong one like you is targeting us. Humans are truly despicable, the queen said. Again, I'm telling you I'm not. Kettle tried to explain but failed again. If that's your choice, I will make you regret it. The queen drew her bow. I am the queen of the Autumn Leaf tribe. Pay for your sins, human. Maybe they're just really hard to have a conversation with, Kettle thought. However, they were speaking the same language. The elves didn't refuse to understand. They simply chose to ignore him as if his words were unworthy of attention. Is the relationship between humans and elves that strained? Having heard the tales of the slave hunters abducting young elves to enslave them, he couldn't blame the elves for hatting him. Kettle felt dejected. I guess there's no choice, then. There was one thing he learned from the white snowfield. Sometimes, people only listened after receiving a little persuasion. But he had no intention of using violence. Striking an elf was unthinkable to him. I just need to make them listen. Kettle made up his mind as the queen drew her bowstring taut once more. A translucent arrow formed at the ready. The string released and the arrow shot forth. It moved with blinding speed, faster than the speed of sound, a blur to the naked eye. Just before the arrow struck, Kettle moved his hand. He caught the flying arrow. It immediately erupted, flames roaring around him, threatening to consume him. Kettle muttered. He responded in the simplest way possible. He just clenched his fist. With a soft hissing sound, the flame dissipated. The elves' eyes widened in shock. What? How? The queen was stunned. Her arrows were no ordinary projectiles. They were imbued with the spirits of nature themselves. Each arrow carried the essence of a fire spirit. Blocking it without injury was supposed to be impossible, even for superhuman warriors. Yet, The human in front of her had snuffed it out with a mere clench of his hand. Then I will have to try more. Determined, she drew another arrow, this time with fury in her eyes. Burn. The bow itself ignited. The extreme heat twisted the air around it, creating distortions. Go, strike him down, the queen yelled fiercely as she released the arrow. The projectile raced forth, gathering shape and energy. It transformed into a blazing phoenix with radiant wings. Ooh, the elves gasped. This was the queen's ultimate technique, Phoenix Arrow. It was a flame that would not die until the target was reduced to ashes, a technique that had never been stopped before. Amazing, Kettle exclaimed. Then he thought, a flaming phoenix, what a fantastical skill. Thoroughly impressed, he clenched his fist and struck the oncoming arrow. Boom. Everything in the punch's trajectory shattered. Branches snapped, and dense vegetation was cleared, leaving a vast, empty space. The wind pressure forcibly extinguished the unquenchable flames. Aya, the queen screamed. The gust swept over the queen, knocking her violently to the ground. Kettle clicked his tongue with a sheepish expression. Did I use too much strength? The queen, battered and bloodied, realized the gap of power between them. That human was no ordinary opponent. He wasn't just a powerful foe, he was someone far beyond her reach. He is a superhuman, at least. The queen could not fathom why such a powerful being was here. She gritted her teeth in frustration. She had confidence in her own strength. However, there was always another wall beyond the ones that had been overcome. Her opponent had reached a level she could never hope to attain. With a resolute expression, she shouted loudly, "Everyone, retreat immediately." My queen, the elder elf was shocked. Now. Understood. Realizing what the queen intended, the elder clenched his teeth and echoed the order. Everyone, fall back. Yes, sir. The elves fled with urgency. The queen struggled to her feet, swaying slightly. Human, I acknowledge your strength, but you will never achieve your purpose here. I'm telling you, I just want to talk. Kettle's face was a picture of exasperation as he responded to her desperate words. The queen clasped her hands together, and flames began to gather, taking shape. I summon you, bearer of the primordial purity, I summon you, scorcher of the pitch-black darkness. It was an incantation. Caught up in the moment, Kettle found himself in awe. He was just delighted to be able to see an actual magic accompanied by an incantation. The sight of true magic left his heart pounding. Come forth, horned one bearing the flames of purity. Fiego, the queen continued with the incantation. The flames morphed into a doorway, and from within, a beast leaped forth, a bull of flickering fire. Wow, Kettle gasped. The bull in front of him was magnificent. Its entire body was engulfed in blazing red flames, and without even doing anything, the temperature of the surrounding forest rose. However, the most distinctive feature was the horn protruding from its head. Though the bull itself was formidable, that horn was on a different level. Even Kettle, who had never seen a spirit before, could notice how powerful that horn was. Yes, this is what you call a spirit, and this is what you call a world of fantasy, Kettle thought in delight. The monsters of the white snowfield were grotesque and alien. They were closer to nightmares than embodiments of fantasy. There were a few rare ones, like the cute ones resembling black slimes or the snake-like beings with a touch of fantasy flair, but the majority were detestable in appearance. However, the bull standing in front of him was different. A horned bull blazing with flames was the very embodiment of the fantasy world he dreamed of. While Kettle trembled with awe, the queen caught her breath with a ragged expression. So, you have summoned me. Fiego scratched the ground with an air of annoyance. I am bound by the king's command to aid you, but entering into contracts has never been worthwhile. It is always nothing but troublesome. Silence, the queen's tone was curt. Fiego, the legendary spirit of fire, wielded a power unmatched by most. And such a being was not easily commanded by its contractor. Just as taming a wild predator was never perfect, spirits, too, resisted absolute control. The more powerful the spirit, the longer it had lived, and with it came an immense pride. Among these, Fiego was the legendary spirit of fire. It embodied the very essence of fire itself, with horns that housed pure flames. Summoning it was a feat even beyond the queen's abilities alone. She had barely managed to form a contract with the aid of other tribe members. "Fulfill the contract, Fiego," the queen said. Annoying as it may be, a contract is a contract, so the task this time is to kill the human before us. Fiego exhaled with a snort and turned its gaze to the human standing before them. When the bull saw the human's peculiar expression, filled with awe, it blinked in disbelief. Is that truly a human? This thought crossed Fiego's mind because the human was too perfect, like a sculpture. If not for the movement of his chest as he breathed, he could have been mistaken for a statue. The queen nodded. "He is human. He has trespassed upon our land." HMPH, a pitiful human daring to covet the domains of nature. I've made my decision. I shall leave nothing but ashes behind. After Fiego stopped talking, it began to stomp its feet. A fiery storm erupted. The flames emanating from his horns engulfed Kettle in an instant. It was pure fire, fire that incinerated all darkness, illuminating the world with a blinding red glow. Boom! Kettle was swallowed by the flames in an instant. "It's all over," Fiego spoke with calm finality. However, the queen shook her head. "It's not over." "What?" A familiar voice emerged from the flames. Kettle moved his hand around, scattering the fire. He stood as he had at the beginning, unscathed. "It's pretty hot, I'll give you that." Despite his words, his expression was calm. Fiego's flames wavered violently. How? The flames the bull wielded were the purest of fire, a fundamental aspect of nature itself. No matter how strong one was, direct contact with it would inevitably cause damage. Yet, here this human stood, unharmed. "So, you possess the power to covet nature, but that is the end of your strength." Fiego's horns burned even brighter. It bent its forelegs, gathering strength in its hind legs. Like a jet engine, flames erupted behind it. "Be impaled." Boom! The bull charged forward. It lunged to pierce Kettle with its horn. Kettle, however, calmly extended his hand. Boom! An explosion rang out. Being elements of nature, spirits typically could not alter their surroundings with their power. However, the grass and trees around them caught fire, consumed by the overwhelming concept of fire that blanketed them. The queen quickly enveloped herself in protective flames. The strength of a legendary spirit was overwhelming. Even approaching it without sufficient power was perilous. An opponent struck with such a force could not possibly survive unscathed. However, it was different with Kettle. "This is impossible," Fiego cried out in disbelief. Its horn was caught by Kettle's palm. The horn, imbued with pure flame, could not pierce mere human flesh before it. Desperately, Fiego drew upon more power. Kettle became completely engulfed in flames. Yet nothing changed. The primordial fire could not scorch his skin. With composure, Kettle clenched his fist. "I'm glad you're in beast form," Kettle said. Slowly he raised his fist. Sensing danger, Fiego tried to pull back, but Kettle's grip held its head firm. "I have no qualms about beating beasts to death," Kettle said. His fist collided with the horn. Crack. Goo. The horn, once indestructible and housing pure fire, shattered against the human's fist. Fiego's form exploded and dispersed. In a single strike, it was banished from the mortal realm. The queen was bewildered. She could not comprehend the power of such magnitude. She knew it was over. With Fiego gone, she had no options left. She closed her eyes in quiet surrender, praying that the barbarian might spare her people. She heard calm footsteps. She shuddered but did not flee. The barbarian stopped right in front of her. "Please have mercy on my people," she begged. To her quiet plea, Kettle placed his hand atop her head. His warm touch was surprisingly gentle. The unexpected gesture caused the queen to open her eyes in surprise. The barbarian spoke softly. I am not your enemy, elf. After much discussion, the queen finally accepted the truth. Kettle was not their enemy. I am sorry, human. We judged you too hastily. The queen bowed her head respectfully. She was ashamed to mistake the one who had brought back their child for an enemy. She felt deeply embarrassed by her actions. Seeing this, Kettle shook his head. It's fine. I heard you fled here because of humans. Even so, it's a bit sad that you never even tried to hear me out. I'm sorry. The queen glanced at Kettle. His hair was a dusty gray, like ash. He was at least 2 heads taller than an average person, so tall that she had to tilt her head all the way back to look at him. And his body was packed with tightly coiled muscles, leaving no space for excess, making him appear more like a statue than a human. However, above all, there was a palpable sense of intimidation. There were no words for it, but it was the feeling of being thrown naked in front of a predator. Elves, being closely attuned to nature, were even more sensitive to such auras than humans. Just as a prey animal instinctively tensed up at the sight of a predator, they instinctively judged Kettle as a threat. Hearing this, Kettle's expression became a bit sour. Is that how it is? I didn't realize it since I've never experienced it before. Are you truly not one of the humans who pursued us? The queen asked. This is my first time seeing elves. There are none in the white snowfield. What? The queen's eyes widened. The white snowfield? Yes. Are you the ashen-haired barbarian of the white snowfield? That's what humans who come from outside call me. Strange. You speak far too fluently for such a title. I learned from the humans, who occasionally wander in. I never thought a human could survive there, the queen murmured in disbelief. The tales of the emperor were widely known, not just among humans, but also among other races. The queen also knew about the dreadful monsters of the white snowfield, and the most dangerous of all was the ashen-haired barbarian. That very legend now stood before her. If Kettle was indeed the ashen-haired barbarian, then his strength made sense. To withstand Fiego's strike with just his body was beyond the strength of any human she could imagine. Well, I suppose if someone like that appeared in my territory, I wouldn't believe it either. Your suspicion was justified, Kettle said. The conversation had begun to flow more naturally. Feeling more at ease, Kettle observed the queen quietly. She is beautiful, Kettle thought. Her features were perfect. Even if he searched for a greater beauty, he doubted he would find it. He sincerely admired her beauty. The queen averted her gaze. She was used to receiving such looks, but this one felt different. It wasn't a gaze filled with human desire. It was as if he were admiring a work of art. By the way, what about that summoned creature? I'm sorry I broke it in half, Kettle said. But that summoned creature attacked you, the queen murmured, surprised that he was concerned about a being that had tried to kill him. Then she shook her head. There is no need to worry. Spirits are beings of nature. When banished, they simply return to the spirit realm. From there, they continued to exchange small talk. Kettle asked about the elves, and the queen answered cautiously. The more they spoke, the more the queen was surprised. Kettle was incredibly intelligent and gentler. He was reasonable, courteous, and considerate. He seemed more like a scholar than a barbarian. Are all barbarians of the white snowfield like you? The queen asked. No, I'm likely an exception, Kettle answered. I see. If all the barbarians from the white snowfield were like him, that would be even more astonishing. She then grew worried about one thing. You coming out of the white snowfield, does that mean other beings from there could emerge as well? She asked. I doubt it, not like me anyway. The white snowfield was bound by rules and conditions. Even powerful beings like the white serpent could not break those rules. Kettle had only managed to escape through a forced quest. That is a relief. The queen genuinely felt relieved. Their territory was close to the white snowfield. If another being as strong as Kettle appeared with hostile intent, she had no idea how to defend against it. After speaking more, Kettle rose to his feet. Well, I should be going. Already, the queen asked. You all need to reorganize your territory. My presence would only be a hindrance. Kettle could feel the glances. The elves had warmed up slightly, but they still kept their distance, clearly fearful. It would only be a burden if he stayed longer. The queen bowed deeply, expressing genuine regret. I apologize. It's okay. I'll come back someday. You are always welcome. I will ensure it, the queen said. That's enough for me. The queen gave him a curious look. She had tried to hurt Kettle with unmistakable intent to kill. Even after realizing he was not the enemy, she had resolved to sacrifice herself for her people's safety. It was only natural that hostility had to be repaid in kind. That was the way of the world. Even if it was all a misunderstanding, she had tried to kill Kettle. She had to bear the consequences. Yet, Kettle showed little reaction and seemed just glad to have the misunderstanding resolved. The queen could not believe that Kettle could treat her with such kindness after a previous attitude. If there was ever a saint, it could be him. I need to atone. The queen's gaze softened. I told you that's not necessary, Kettle replied. No, I cannot be at peace otherwise. Is there anything you desire? Whatever it is, I shall grant it. No matter what Kettle might ask, she was ready to give it to him. With such determination in her words, Kettle's eyes gleamed. He said, In that case, is it possible for me to make a contract with a spirit? What? The queen was flustered by the unexpected request. Kettle's eyes sparkled like a child. After staring at him for a moment, the queen shook her head. I'm sorry, but I don't think that's possible. There are humans who are close to nature and can make contracts with spirits, but... So, it's difficult for me. Even the elves are frightened of you. Spirits, being even closer to nature, would be even more so. I see. It seemed forming a contract with a spirit was impossible. Kettle's expression fell. Seeing this, the queen hesitated for a moment before making a decision. If you truly wish to make a contract with a spirit, go to Elfo Sagrado. Elfo Sagrado, Kettle asked. It is the place where our elven god resides. It is the sacred ground of all elves. It's the only place that can make your wish come true. I will tell you its location. Keep it to yourself. The sacred ground of the elves. Would a human like me even be allowed in there? Normally, no, but with my introduction, it should be possible. The sacred ground of the elves, Elfo Sagrado, was a dream destination for anyone studying elves. No elf, no matter how tortured or tempted, had ever revealed its location to another race. However, the queen had made her decision. She reached into the air. A gem of flame manifested as it fell into Kettle's hand. Take this. Even if you reach the vicinity, our god will test you, but you should have no problem, the queen said. I gratefully accept. It was time to go. Kettle rose to leave the forest. The queen bowed again respectfully. I am Marsiria Hashian Karuja, queen of the Autumn Leaf Tribe. And your name is? She asked. I am Kettle, just Kettle. Indeed, Kettle, I will never forget this debt. Return to us one day. I will, Kettle smiled, turning away. Marsiria watched quietly until he disappeared. The elves were the first race Kettle had encountered after leaving the white snowfield. There were some miscommunications, but overall, it was not a bad encounter. Thanks to his conversation with the elf queen, he had learned quite a bit about their species. Although he wanted to stay longer, he had no choice but to leave because the other elves feared him. He was still satisfied, though. I even received this, Kettle said to himself, holding a crimson jewel radiating with a fiery glow. The queen talked about the sacred ground of the elves, Elfo Sagrado. With this jewel, he was allowed to step inside the elves' sacred ground, the place where their god resided. He wondered what sort of place it could be and how many elves would dwell there. He also wondered if spirits of nature would roam freely there. Scenes from various fantasy tales he had read flashed through his mind. Just the thought of going to Elfo Sagrado made his heart race. He wanted to rush there immediately. However, he restrained himself. This was a rare opportunity to experience a fantasy world. Nothing was stopping him anymore, and he could afford to take things slow and enjoy the journey at his leisure. First, I need to meet other people. The elf queen had mentioned a nearby estate. If he went west after leaving the forest, he would come across a fairly large estate. Kettle's heart pounded. He could hardly contain his excitement thinking about meeting new people in this fantasy world. I should pick up the pace, he said. With a strong kick, he sprang forward. The earth cracked beneath him and trees were uprooted. In the blink of an eye, he became a distant dot. Yalhoun. A guard at the outer gate let out a long yawn and looked ahead with sleepy eyes. Nothing but empty plains stretched to the horizon. Hey, rookie. Yes, sir. The fresh-faced guard straightened up and answered briskly. Think it'd be all right if I snuck off for a nap? The senior guard asked. And no, sir, this is our shift. Whatever, nobody ever comes here anyways. But still. Look, just keep quiet, all right? I'm off to rest. You just need to not tell anyone about this. If you do, you're dead to me, the senior guard said. The rookie stammered. The senior guard stretched and was about to head off to his makeshift rest spot. You can rest if you don't mind getting fired. A voice from behind froze the guard in his tracks. The senior guard turned his head with a forced grin. See, Commander, when did you get here? Quit picking on the rookie and do your job. The guard commander smacked him on the head. Rubbing his sore scalp, the senior guard mumbled, Nothing but snowfields to the east, sir. No one ever comes this way. Does standing guard on this post even matter? Quit whining and focus. Word is that the Lord might schedule special training if he hears you've been slacking. The guard's face fell instantly. The commander continued in a flat tone. Trouble doesn't wait for us to be ready. You never know when a dungeon or monster den might appear. Stay alert. But how likely is that? The guard mumbled. Your job is to be ready for that unlikely event. Focus. There are enough unsettling rumors as it is. A long time ago, after the Demon King's defeat by the champion, demons and devils were barred from interfering with the mortal realm. However, now, after thousands of years, the demons were resurfacing. There's talk of the kingdom falling, but news is sparse here. For now, keep watch. The Demon King's army could come over that horizon any moment, the commander said. I doubt that's true, the guard grumbled but straightened up. He had no desire to get hit again. His eyes scanned the horizon. Nothing appeared and nothing was heard. All was peaceful. Though the world might be in turmoil, this was an estate at the edge of the white snowfield, serene and quiet. The guard yawned again and resumed his watch. Minutes, then hours passed. The rookie guard frowned and said, Sir, do you hear something strange? What do you mean? I don't hear anything. It's faint, but it seems to be getting closer. After concentrating, the senior guard heard it too. The sound was faint, but unmistakable, a deep, resounding vibration that seemed to shake the earth itself. Thud. Thud. The noise grew louder, and the guards realized that something massive was charging toward their estate. W8. Thud. The sound was now audible to everyone. Even the commander, who had gone inside the castle to handle some affairs, rushed out, alarmed. What's going on? The commander asked. Sir, something's approaching. Thud. The sound grew even louder. Whatever was approaching was close and dangerous. The commander shouted urgently, Sound the bell, gather all guards. Yes, sir. Where's the knight? The knight is not in the estate, sir. He is away escorting the young lady to the capital. Damn it, the commander clenched his teeth. Guards were mustered quickly, and they formed ranks, waiting tensely. Thud. The sound echoed, shaking the entire estate. Civilians crouched in fear. Thud. The vibration approached. Thud. Dust rose from the fortress walls, coating the air. Thud. The ground trembled, and the guards felt their feet briefly leave the ground every time the sound echoed. Thud. The shockwave slammed into them, leaving faces pale and bodies trembling. Panic spread as some guards tried to run away. Don't you dare run, the commander barked through gritted teeth. "We are the guards of the Barkin estate. Protect your family and friends with your lives." "Why, yes, sir," the guards shouted defiantly, determined to stand their ground. The roaring sound drew impossibly close and then stopped. The periodic thuds ceased. Silence fell, and confusion gripped the guards. "Commander," one of the guards asked. "Hold position." The commander gulped as he ordered the guards. Moments of silence passed. Then, a figure appeared beyond the horizon. "Ah!" The guards gripped their spears tightly. The figure approached steadily. The commander's eyes widened, and a single thought crossed his mind: it's small. The figure wasn't the massive threat they had feared. As it neared, its size seemed comparable to their own. Step by step, it drew closer. The guards held their breath. The commander forced himself to stay calm and stepped forward. Footsteps echoed. Finally, the figure came into view. The commander's eyes widened. A barbarian. An ashen-haired barbarian stood before them, speaking in fluent common tongue. "Greetings," the barbarian said. From Kettle's perspective, the estate was rather sizable. A sturdy outer wall surrounded the land, enclosing a moderately sized castle within. Its architecture was reminiscent of the medieval style, yet something about it felt distinctly different. Perhaps it was the fantastical aura that lent it a unique charm. "That's a good-looking castle," Kettle murmured. He was curious about what lay inside. The thought of exploring the interior filled him with anticipation. With a relaxed pace, he walked forward. The tips of the guards' spears quivered in their hands, betraying their unease. The guard commander gritted his teeth as he stared at Kettle. He thought, he is enormous. The commander was not accustomed to looking up at others. Yet here, for the first time, he had to crane his neck to see someone who towered over him by at least a head. It wasn't just Kettle's height, his physique was equally imposing. However, it didn't feel excessive or bulky. His body resembled a perfectly sculpted statue. He wore a leather vest, and a scar ran across his chest. An ashen-haired barbarian. The commander's mind flashed to tales of the legendary being. Don't come any closer," one of the trembling guards shouted, his voice crackling. It was an involuntary cry born out of sheer terror. Kettle's gaze shifted to the guard, and the man's face turned pale as a sheet. "He is going to kill me," the guard thought, frozen in fear. Contrary to expectations, Kettle stopped in his tracks. He said calmly, "I mean no harm." "Why, you can talk," the guard stammered. "I have no intention of being your enemy, so there's no need to worry. I'd appreciate it if you could just relax." He's fluent." The guards exchanged dumbfounded murmurs, their disbelief palpable. Kettle frowned and asked, "Is it standard for barbarians in this world to be incapable of speech?" "Well, no, but," the guard commander muttered without thinking. Kettle's expression shifted, a hint of intrigue crossing his face. "So, there are other barbarians here?" "Oh, well," the commander could not answer him. The spear tip still refused to lower, despite Kettle's warm greetings. Remaining composed, Kettle spoke again. "I am not your enemy." Over the course of his travels, most of the people he encountered reacted to him with fear and hostility. Kettle had grown used to it. Even in the white snowfield, he had seen his share of outsiders panicking and attacking him. By now, it didn't faze him. Calmly, he continued attempting to communicate. Slowly but surely, the trembling spear tips steadied. Once he had judged the situation to be manageable, Kettle addressed the guard commander directly. "You must be the leader here." "How did you know?" the commander asked. "It's obvious. Your attire is distinct from the others. As I've said before, I have no intention of being hostile." "What do you want from us?" the commander asked hesitantly. "My goal is simple," Kettle said. He raised a hand, startling the guard, but he ignored their reaction and pointed toward the estate behind them. "I want to visit your estate." Kettle was escorted to the inspection room, where he sat on a chair that groaned under his weight. "We just bought that chair," the guard commander thought uneasily, staring at the chair that was too small for the barbarian. Slowly, he asked, You said you wanted to visit our estate. Is your purpose simply to pass through? If possible, I'd like to stay for a while. I'm unsure how long, Kettle responded. You want to stay here, the commander sighed. The barbarian in front of him wanted to reside in his estate. The guard commander hesitated. He didn't know whether to refuse or allow him to stay. There were no solid reasons to deny the request. Manuals for such situations existed, outlining proper protocols. And yet, the commander couldn't shake the fear he felt toward Kettle in their first encounter. It was a primal instinct, a natural reaction to the presence of such an overwhelming being. Sharing the same territory as this man was the last thing the guard commander wanted. As he wrestled with his thoughts, Kettle spoke again. I am not your enemy. His words were quiet, but carried a weight that calmed the commander's turbulent mind. I am a visitor to your estate. You are the guard commander responsible for managing visitors. That's all this is. Just do your job, Kettle said. All right. The commander finally collected himself. Upon reflection, he realized that they had allowed barbarians to enter their estate before. This wasn't an unprecedented situation. My apologies. It's fine, Kettle responded indifferently. He was long accustomed to such exchanges, so they hardly affected him anymore. With his composure restored, the commander began his duties. His job was to confirm the identity of outsiders and assess potential threats. Carefully, he asked, What is your name? Kettle, he answered. Kettle, I need to ask about the noise earlier. Noise. As you approached, there was a sound, growing louder in regular intervals. Do you know what caused it? Kettle tilted his head. I have no idea. All I did was run. I see, the commander said, gulping. He couldn't imagine the deafening noise to have been caused merely by Kettle running. No, that's impossible, the guard commander thought. He pushed the thought aside. If it wasn't directly related to the barbarian, it was none of his concern. They could investigate later if necessary. Even if it were true, there was no point dwelling on something far beyond his ability to control. Do you have any form of identification or someone who can verify your identity? The commander asked. I don't have anything like that. Kettle suddenly remembered something and held up a necklace. Would this work? What is it? It bears the crest of the Akasha family. I received it from one of their kin. The commander cautiously took the necklace. He knew of the Akasha family as they had passed through their estate to reach the white snowfield several years ago. The commander recalled having an enjoyable conversation with one of their members and remembered them giving him an insignia. The Akasha family, you mean the merchant family from the Denayan kingdom? The commander asked. You know of them. They have been gaining prominence recently. After their head of family changed a few years ago, their influence has grown rapidly. Is that so? It seemed their business ventures were thriving. Examining the insignia, the commander muttered, It doesn't look fake, but it's hard to verify. Is this estate not part of the Denayan kingdom? Kettle asked. No, this is the kingdom of Jehantra. The commander returned the necklace. It's not enough for confirmation, but it helps. To the commander, Kettle didn't seem like a threat. Even if the necklace was a well-crafted forgery, it indicated that the barbarian had the intelligence to fake a family's insignia, which was a quality that could be reasoned with. The truly frightening threats were mindless beasts. Intelligent beings could be bound by laws and agreements. The commander firmly believed this. Fine, you may enter, but there are conditions, the commander said. Oh, Kettle grinned. The moment the commander saw that smile, his confidence wavered like a toppled row of dominoes. Can he really be controlled? From the commander's perspective, Kettle seemed like a powerful beast with intelligence, which seemed more dangerous. Kettle's smile was simply one of delight, but the commander's mind raced with conflicting thoughts. What are the conditions? Kettle asked. We need to verify something, the commander said, forcing himself to remain steady. We need proof that you are not a threat. Hearing the guard commander's explanation, he muttered to himself, A dungeon raid, huh? The commander's explanation had been straightforward. There were 3 others, like Kettle, whose identities were unclear but who also sought entry to the estate. The condition for their entry was to team up and clear a nearby dungeon. Let me make it clear. If you don't accept this condition, you can't enter our estate. This is the minimum requirement, the commander said preemptively. Barbarians typically hated complications and detested fighting alongside warriors they didn't personally acknowledge. A barbarian agreeing to cooperate in a dungeon raid was almost unheard of. Most would soon throw a tantrum, demanding to enter alone. However, Kettle nodded readily. Very well, I accept. You're okay with it? The commander asked. A rule is a rule. If that's what it takes, I will abide by it. I appreciate it. The commander felt a twinge of admiration. He hadn't expected a barbarian to agree to something so cumbersome. In all his dealings with barbarians, this was a first. Of course, Kettle's agreement wasn't born from a sense of duty or respect for rules. Though he kept a calm exterior, his excitement was almost uncontainable. A dungeon raid? Yes, I'm going to a dungeon, Kettle thought. To him, this was one of the ultimate fantasies, and he wasn't doing it inside a virtual game, but in real life. The thrill of it was almost overwhelming, making all the hardships he had endured feel worthwhile. Kettle grinned, and the commander forcibly calmed his trembling body. So, forming a party for a dungeon raid is the condition, huh? That seems simple enough, Kettle said. There is one more condition, the commander added. After clearing the dungeon, you will need to report back everything that occurred, any anomalies, unusual events, or noteworthy details. If you meet that requirement, then you will be allowed into the estate. Ah, Kettle said with a nod. So, it's a system of mutual observation, isn't it? What? Am I wrong? For individuals with unclear identities, their backgrounds need verification. But you can't trust their words outright, Kettle said. Words from an untrustworthy source carried no weight. They offered no assurance. However, if those words come from someone who worked together in a dungeon raid, it's a different story. Though Kettle wasn't entirely sure what a dungeon entailed, he guessed it wouldn't be easy. It would require significant use of his strength. Furthermore, he had to do it with other people, cooperating with complete strangers. In such a scenario, anyone who couldn't adapt to the group would quickly stand out. This system forced individuals with ambiguous identities to monitor each other, filtering out troublemakers in the process. While the system had its limits and flaws, it served as an effective sieve. That's impressive. Someone definitely put some thought into this. Did you come up with this? Kettle asked. No, I didn't, the commander admitted with a dumbfounded expression. What the? In regions outside major cities or capitals, there was no reliable method to verify the identities of everyone born there. Many people with unclear backgrounds existed, and not a small number of them caused trouble. However, rejecting all such individuals outright was impossible due to their sheer numbers. To address this, the kingdom's skilled administrators had devised this process after days of deliberation. Weaker individuals were simply allowed entry, while those strong enough to pose a potential threat were forced to form parties and clear dungeons. At first, even the commander had been skeptical about the effectiveness of this method, but when it was implemented, it proved highly successful. Aggressive mercenaries and shady thieves, forced to cooperate, often ended up exposing themselves as threats. In some cases, they even turned on each other inside the dungeon, eliminating themselves. While it wasn't foolproof, it reduced the number of incidents caused by outsiders significantly. Only those capable of maintaining peace and showing consideration for others gained access to the estate. After witnessing the system's effectiveness, the commander had grudgingly acknowledged the value of the taxes funding such administrative brilliance. Yet, Kettle had grasped the concept immediately after hearing it once. Are you really a barbarian? The commander asked, his voice filled with genuine curiosity. I am, regrettably, Kettle replied with a smirk. You're unlike any barbarian I've ever encountered. So, there are barbarians here as well. There are, but they're a troublesome lot, the commander said, shaking his head as he stood. Let's get moving. If we add you to the existing party, we can start the dungeon raid immediately. The commander rose, and Kettle followed him with a grin. One last thing, you will be raiding the dungeon with 3 others. Be cautious. If anyone dies or gets seriously injured, your stay here might be jeopardized, the commander explained. Who are the others? Kettle asked. Well, there is a thief to start. Kettle liked that a thief was in his party. Every party needed at least one thief. Next, a warrior who claims to be a paladin, the commander said. Claims to be? What does that mean? It's hard to explain. You will understand when you meet him. Kettle was equally pleased that a warrior was in his party. A frontline companion to share the burden of combat was essential. And lastly, a priest. Kettle was very happy with his party composition. Every party needed a healer, after all. The composition was ideal, though there was one thing he found lacking. No mage. Mages are precious resources, tightly managed by the Mage Tower. Any mages who aren't affiliated with the Mage Tower are dealt with by the Tower, the commander said. I see. The mention of the Mage Tower intrigued Kettle. It was a fascinating term that made his heart race with anticipation. However, one question remained. Kettle asked, so the priest, are they also of uncertain identity? Priests who served gods typically derived their credibility from their divine affiliation. The commander's expression turned awkward. That's usually the case, but her situation is a bit different. You will understand when you meet her. Fair enough. It was time to meet the party members, who would join him in the dungeon raid. The guard commander opened the door. 3 people were gathered in the waiting room. The first was a man with a sharp, agile appearance, dressed in light leather armor and wearing a sly grin, the thief. The second was a middle-aged man, wearing battered, heavily worn armor that emphasized his stubborn nature, the warrior. The third was a young, black-haired priestess with an ambiguous smile, her youthful face betraying her inexperience. The warrior let out a heavy sigh, his face etched with a mix of deep disdain and self-loathing. He said, "Damn it all. The law has left me no choice but to enter a dungeon with a filthy rat who lives off pickpocketing the innocents. It's pathetic." "Why are you trying to pick a fight again, old man?" the thief retorted, smirking. "Still mad about what I said earlier?" "I have no intention of talking to rats like you," the warrior barked. His voice was rough, filled with contempt. But if the thief was one to take words at face value, he wouldn't be called a thief. He retorted, "Hey, everything I said was true. You're just mad because a thief swindled you and cleaned you out of your fortune." "You filthy little." The warrior's eyes twitched, his anger flaring as the thief grinned wider. "Tough break, but let's be real. If you got robbed, that's on you for being an idiot. Why take it out on me?" "You bastard," the warrior roared, standing abruptly. "How dare you insult me? I am Sir Alexandros Tyrannus, a paladin." "Paladin, my ass. So that's what they're calling people in shoddy armor these days." The thief's mocking tone cut deep. Although the warrior's armor was technically plate mail, it was riddled with holes and streaked with rust, barely capable of offering any real protection. "Let's face it, if you were a real paladin, you wouldn't even be here." A paladin, by definition, was a knight devoted to their deity, a figure of high status. Just their title alone was proof of their rank and station. "You're nothing but a self-proclaimed paladin. You're just a wanderer like me, another bug on the ground. And Tyrannus, what kind of ridiculous name is that anyway?" the thief sneered. "You..." Unable to hold back his fury, the warrior drew his sword. Undeterred, the thief pulled out a dagger from his coat, its blade smeared with green poison. "Bring it on," the thief said with a wicked grin. "Think that ragged armor will save you?" "I wish you two would stop," a low voice interrupted them. But neither the thief nor the warrior paid any attention. The priestess sighed deeply. The two had been at each other's throats for hours. She had tried to mediate at first, but it was clear neither would back down. Now, she could only resign herself to the hopelessness of the situation. The thought of entering a dungeon with these two gave her a massive headache. We're still waiting on one more person, she thought grimly. The minimum number required for a dungeon raid was 4. If the newcomer was anything like these two, there was no way they could successfully raid the dungeon. I hope this dungeon doesn't turn into our tomb, she muttered. It was very much possible, and the idea left her feeling deeply sorrowful. Amidst the tension, the door suddenly creaked open. The thief and the warrior hastily stashed their weapons, though the damage was already done. The guard commander who entered took one look at the scene and scowled. I hope you understand that you're all being assessed. Hey, I get it, but I'm not so sure about the guy who keeps calling himself a paladin, the thief quipped. You little, the warrior yelled. Is that all you can say, old man? Enough, the commander snapped, ignoring them both. Whether they lived or died in the dungeon wasn't his concern. I just brought in the last member for the dungeon raid. Oh, please let them be normal, the thief muttered under his breath. You can judge for yourself. Come in. And then Kettle entered the room. In that instant, the room fell silent. The three of them, the thief, the warrior, and the priestess, instinctively lifted their heads, overwhelmed by his sheer presence. Whoa. So you guys are my party members, Kettle said with a broad grin, raising a hand in greeting. The waiting room, large enough to hold 10 people comfortably, suddenly felt cramped. Kettle's presence alone filled the space, radiating an aura of dominance. The three of them knew that if they picked a fight with the barbarian, they would die. Their instincts screamed the warning, and they all fell silent, their bravado snuffed out like candles. As if expecting this reaction, the guard commander left the room with a short goodbye. Get acquainted. I will return shortly. With a heavy thud, the door closed, leaving the 4 of them alone. An oppressive silence hung over the room. Let's start with introductions, Kettle said, breaking the silence. My name is Kettle, a barbarian. Despite his invitation, no one answered. This isn't as lively as I expected, Kettle mused, slightly disappointed. A shy bunch, huh? Realizing he had to take the lead, he smiled, trying to appear approachable. Eep, the priestess nearly yelped, trembling under his gaze. Kettle turned to the thief. What's your name? I'm Cassenhark, a thief, he stammered, his tongue dry. He had seen barbarians before, dumb, brutish, easy marks, but something about Kettle felt different. This one wasn't a fool. One wrong move, and he'd be dead. And you? Kettle asked, shifting his gaze to the warrior. I am Sir Alexandros Tyrannus, a paladin, he declared, defiance flickering in his eyes as he clenched his fists tightly. The thief couldn't help but feel a sliver of admiration for the warrior. Standing firm in front of this barbarian took real guts. Paladin, Kettle tilted his head. Then you wield divine power. Well, I would, but I'm a unique case, so I don't have divine power, the warrior admitted through gritted teeth. I see, Kettle said, letting the topic drop as he turned to the priestess. And you? I am Hayes, priestess of Kaloja, the god of lies and deception, she whispered, her fearful eyes darting toward Kettle. Barbarians were savage beings who denied and mocked the gods. The enmity between barbarians and clergy was infamous. She had heard horror stories from senior priests about barbarians attacking them on sight. Ah, priestess, it's a pleasure to meet you, Kettle exclaimed, beaming. Hayes blinked, startled. She had braced an attack but was instead greeted with an almost joyous warmth, as if she were a long-lost ally. The door creaked open again, and the guard commander reappeared. Are you guys done talking? More or less, Kettle replied. Good, let's move out, follow me. And with that, the party set off. The 4 of them followed the guard commander across the barren plains, outside the estate. As they walked, Kettle's curiosity about Hayes grew. Even as a priestess, they're making you go through the dungeon raid. Well, the god I serve is the god of lies and deception, Kaloja, she answered hesitantly, her voice faltering. Many of Kaloja's followers, unfortunately, do not have the best reputations. I see, Kettle replied thoughtfully. Not all gods were benevolent. The god of lies and deception likely had a history of causing trouble, leading to distrust among the people of the estate. But a god of lies and deception, does that mean their divine powers align with those aspects? Kettle asked. Those who devoted themselves wholeheartedly to a god could wield fragments of their divine abilities, and people called these fragments the divine powers. Hayes nodded cautiously and said, "Yes, but as a lower-ranking priestess, I can only use minor powers." What kind of powers? Kettle's curiosity deepened. "I can manipulate dice rolls or create illusions to deceive my opponents," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "I see why people might not think highly of that." Kettle nodded in understanding. "Ahaha," she laughed nervously, unsure of what to make of Kettle's unflinching demeanor. His friendliness unsettled her. What's going on? She thought, struggling to make sense of his attitude. Is he planning to convert? The idea of a barbarian, a known godless savage, embracing the greatness of Kaloja and offering his faith was startling. As a priestess, she knew she should welcome the thought of a new follower, especially since her journey was as much about guiding others as it was about her own training, but the idea terrified her. She selfishly wished someone else would take on that responsibility. Shame washed over her for even thinking such a thing. "We've arrived," the guard commander said, halting abruptly. Ahead of them loomed a dark cave. "Oh," Kettle said, his eyes lighting up with anticipation. This was the dungeon. "There are 3 floors to this dungeon. The monsters inside are undead. If you work together," the commander trailed off, glancing at Kettle, "you should be able to clear it. Bring back the token once you've completed the dungeon raid." "Understood. Thanks for the explanation," Kettle said with a nod. "Good luck." The guard commander hesitated briefly, a complicated expression on his face before walking away. The group now stood before the dungeon's entrance. Kettle clapped his hands together, causing the other 3 to flinch. "All right, I'd like to get started. How do we approach this? This is my first time doing anything with other party members, so I will need some guidance," Kettle said, looking at the others. Casson glanced at Kettle nervously. "Has anyone here cleared a dungeon before?" None of them raised their hands. Casson cleared his throat and spoke cautiously. "I've got some experience, so I will take the lead. Since it's a standard dungeon, let's follow the usual formation." "And that is?" Kettle asked. "Well, Mr. Kettle, you end." "You don't have to call me Mr. We're comrades after all." Kettle interrupted him. "Ha, okay?" Casson laughed nervously, then he continued to speak. "Well, Kettle and Alexandros will take the front line, while I will handle trap detection. Hayes will support us from the back with her divine powers. That's the standard formation." "Got it," Kettle said. He stepped forward and clapped Alexandros on the shoulder, the creak of the battered armor audible. "You and I are on the front line. Let's watch each other's backs." "Okay," Alexandros replied with a resolute nod, despite his obvious tension. With that, Kettle strode confidently into the dungeon, the others reluctantly following behind him. The dungeon air was damp and oppressive. Casson led the group, carefully inspecting the path ahead for traps, while the others trailed behind him. They had walked some distance when he suddenly raised his hand. "Stop, monsters ahead," Casson whispered. "I don't see anything," Kettle remarked. "Look at the scattered bones on the ground. Those are monsters called skeletons. Once we get close enough, they will rise and attack us," Casson explained, pointing to the scattered bones. "Interesting," Kettle said, a smile spreading across his face. Skeletons were a classic type of monster from fantasy worlds. He couldn't help but wonder what they would look like in action. Misinterpreting Kettle's grin, Casson shuddered. This barbarian must be itching for a fight. Swallowing his unease, he composed himself and spoke. "Skeletons are tough opponents. We will need to prepare properly." Casson explained further about the skeletons. Even if they were injured, they would keep moving. They would fight relentlessly, even with their limbs severed. And since they were made of bones, their defense was quite high. This dungeon is harder than I expected, Casson thought grimly. He had cleared dungeons before, but this one felt like a different level altogether. He glanced at Kettle. I guess the difficulty is balanced because of him. Even so, they needed to be cautious. Hayes, ready your divine powers. Alexandros, raise your shield. Kettle, please prepare for the battle as well. I will look for openings during the fight. Casson instructed the party. How do we defeat them? Kettle asked. You have to target their neck. Their bodies will keep moving no matter where else you hit them, so go for their necks. Their bones are tough, so you'll likely need several strikes to bring them down. Understood. With everyone prepared, Kettle and Alexandros took the front. As they advanced, the skeletons began to stir, the clattering of bones echoing in the darkness. Fight! Casson shouted. Alexandros raised his shield. Hayes began her prayer, and Casson himself melted into the shadows, waiting for an opening. The first skeleton, now fully risen, brandished its sword. Kettle swung his hand. Crack! The skeleton's skull shattered into powder, and it collapsed into a heap of bones. Bone powder scattered across the dungeon floor like fine sand as the skeleton, now decapitated, collapsed into fragments. Huh. What? The party members, who were primed for combat, began to relax a bit. They stared blankly, first at Kettle, then at the pulverized remains of the skeleton's skull. Oh, Kettle said, his expression one of satisfied curiosity as he studied the now lifeless skeleton. Casson, you were right. Once the head is destroyed, it stops moving. Haha, I told you. Casson's awkward laughter concealed his unease. That's not what I meant at all. Casson had suggested targeting the neck, not obliterating the head into powder. Gulping hard, he glanced at the shattered skeleton, unnerved. Skeletons were monsters made entirely of bone, a naturally hard substance. Even a skilled swordsman would struggle to sever bones without the aid of aura. Moreover, skeletons in dungeons were further reinforced by mana, making their bones significantly tougher than normal. The standard strategy for dealing with skeletons was methodical. Aim for the joints in the neck, striking repeatedly until the vertebrae weakened. It was a process akin to chopping down a tree, time-consuming and exhausting. However, Kettle hadn't just severed the neck. He had reduced the skull to dust with a single strike. Is this guy even human? Casson thought. From the moment they had met, Kettle's strength had been evident, but Casson didn't think he would be this powerful. This was beyond anything he had imagined. Crushing a skeleton's skull into powder with nothing but his palm was something no one would believe without seeing it firsthand. Casson gulped hard, his gaze fixating on Kettle's hand. He imagined what would happen to his own head if that destructive palm reached his head. He shuddered at the thought, and a similar tremor passed through Alexandros and Hayes. Let's keep moving, Kettle said with a grin. Only he remained cheerful. Yes, understood, Casson stammered, his tone noticeably more respectful. With Casson leading once more, the party pressed forward. They hadn't gone far when he raised a hand to signal a stop. Another monster? Kettle asked, his eyes lighting up. And no, it's a trap, Casson corrected him, shaking his head. I will disable it so we can pass safely. A trap, Kettle exclaimed, his enthusiasm growing. What kind of trap is it? If you look closely at the wall here, Casson stammered, pointing to a circular indentation in the stone. He was terrified of Kettle's enthusiasm. You will see how the trap works. This trap is activated by detecting weight on the floor. Judging by its design, spikes will likely shoot out. I will handle it. Pulling out a thin rod, Casson carefully inserted it into the hole, twisting and prodding until a faint click signaled success. It's disarmed. We can proceed now, he said. Is that how you deal with traps? Kettle asked, intrigued. Most traps in dungeons are mechanical, Casson explained. You can disable them by triggering them in a controlled way or by breaking their mechanisms with a blade. I see, Kettle responded, beaming. Monsters, traps, teamwork, it was everything he had dreamed of in a dungeon. Living this experience was a joy beyond words for him. Let's move on. Yes, Casson's reply was less enthusiastic. A little further in, they came across another pile of scattered bones, another skeleton. Kettle's eyes lit up. He turned to his party members with an earnest expression. "I have a request." What is it?" Casson asked nervously. "Would it be okay if I handled that skeleton by myself? There are some things I'd like to test out." "Well, I'm fine with it," Casson said hesitantly. Kettle turned to Alexandros and Hayes, who nodded vigorously. He smiled, moved by their support. "Thank you." "Not at all. Please do as you wish," Casson said quickly. No one dared object to a man capable of turning a skeleton's skull to powder. As Kettle approached, the bones began assembling into the familiar humanoid form of a skeleton. Casson watched in silence, unable to predict what Kettle intended to do. Barbarians typically disliked coordinated teamwork. He wondered perhaps Kettle just wanted to fight solo, obliterating the skeleton with a single blow like before. Kettle, however, gazed at the skeleton with genuine interest. Fascinating. What kind of structure allows this? Despite lacking muscles, the skeleton moved with surprising speed, brandishing its sword. Skeletons were a quintessential monster of the fantasy world, composed of nothing but bones. Kettle had read over hundreds of articles and documents about them. In the process, he imagined tens of thousands of scenarios involving skeletons. Now, that monster was right before his eyes. Kettle didn't need to imagine the scenarios anymore. The skeleton swung its sword. Kettle moved his hand. Clang. He caught the blade with his fingers, stopping at mid-swing. With a twist of his hand, the sword snapped in two. "What will the skeleton do now?" Kettle murmured to himself, amused. Unfazed, the skeleton advanced and swung its shortened weapon. Kettle dodged effortlessly, laughing as he observed the behavior. That monster is adjusting its attack range after its weapon was broken off. That shows some sort of intelligence. Or is it the dungeon's mana guiding it? Kettle grabbed the skeleton's arm mid-swing. "What will happen if I do this?" Crunch. The arm shattered, the fragments falling to the floor. The skeleton dropped the broken sword but bent down to pick it up with its other hand. Kettle's eyes sparkled with admiration. "You can switch hands. Then what if I destroy the other one?" Crunch. The skeleton's other arm disintegrated, leaving it without a way to wield a weapon. Undeterred, it lunged with its jagged, broken limbs, sharp enough to tear flesh. "Incredible. It can adapt. Its intelligence is surprisingly high," Kettle remarked, grinning as he continued his observations. He was utterly engrossed in studying this monster. He wondered how the skeleton moved and how it could attack without a weapon. He was curious if it still moved even if all of its limbs were destroyed. The fantastical creature he had longed to encounter was right in front of him, and it was only natural for him to want to know everything about it. For Kettle, his actions were entirely justified. However, to the other party members, it was a horrifying spectacle. "Wow," Hayes turned pale, stepping back instinctively. Alexandros gripped his sword tighter without realizing it, and Casson gulped hard. To them, it seemed Kettle was toying with the skeleton like a child with a doll, breaking its limbs and smiling all the while. This is a true barbarian, Casson thought, his fear solidifying. Toying with a weaker opponent just to satisfy his own curiosity. After an indeterminate amount of time, the skeleton was reduced to a single moving skull, clattering noisily on the floor. Even with just a head, it can still move, so the skull acts as a control hub. "That's fascinating," Kettle mused as he raised his foot and crushed the skull into powder. "Excellent," Kettle muttered, suppressing his laughter. He had learned so much about skeletons in a single encounter. It was exhilarating. "I should get a notebook," Kettle thought. "I need to write this all down." Turning to the group, he said, "Apologies for the delay." "No need to apologize. Please take as much time as you like," Casson shouted stiffly, his posture rigid. Kettle tilted his head, puzzled by the thief's reaction, but he didn't dwell on it. He was too content. "Let's move on," he said. "Yes," Casson replied, his voice echoing through the dungeon, sounding far more disciplined than before. With the first floor cleared without issue, the party came upon a staircase leading downward, the entrance to the second floor one. "This must be the second floor," Casson said. Descending the stairs, they found themselves in a wide, open space. Perhaps we should take a short break," Casson suggested carefully to Kettle. While Kettle didn't appear physically tired, having handled most of the combat so far, the mental strain on the party was considerable. "That sounds like a good idea," Kettle nodded in agreement. "Thank you," Casson bowed deeply, visibly relieved. The group sat down to rest, though they kept a noticeable distance from Kettle. The barbarian, staring absent-mindedly at the ceiling, suddenly spoke. "Casson, I have a question." "Why, yes, what would you like to know?" Casson replied, startled. "What exactly is a dungeon?" Casson's eyes widened slightly. "You don't know." "Embarrassingly, I've had little opportunity for learning," Kettle admitted. A barbarian expressing a desire to learn would have drawn ridicule from his peers, who often dismissed intellectual pursuits as pointless. However, Casson quickly shook his head and said, "No, seeking knowledge is admirable. That said, I don't know much about dungeons either." I don't know much myself," Alexandros added hastily. Their eyes turned toward Hayes. "As a priestess, don't you receive basic education on such topics?" Casson asked her. "Well, yes, but," she hesitated. "Oh, then would you mind answering a few questions?" Kettle also chimed in. "Of course, Kaloja teaches us never to refuse those who seek knowledge," Hayes said with a strained smile, internally wincing. "What would you like to know?" "This dungeon is quite close to the estate. Isn't that a problem?" Kettle inquired. Typically, monsters within a dungeon do not venture outside. While there are exceptions in such cases, we usually detect and address the issue early on, she explained. But there's something odd about this dungeon. How is it still here?" Kettle asked, running his hand along the wall. The stone bore the marks of age. If it's been here for so long, surely someone would have dealt with it by now. "Oh, this dungeon likely appeared less than a week ago," Hayes said. "Less than a week," Kettle repeated, visibly surprised. Hayes nodded. "Dungeons form naturally. Sometimes they are caves, other times towers. They often appear near places with high human activity." "Ah, so that explains this location," Kettle mused, glancing around. The dungeon was indeed situated close to the estate. When a dungeon appears, the estate assesses its threat level. Outsiders like us, mercenaries or guards, are then dispatched to handle it, Hayes added. "I see," Kettle said, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "Do dungeons ever appear within the estate?" "No, they always form a certain distance away." "Not even once," Kettle pressed. "Not as far as I've been taught," she replied. "Interesting," Kettle said, a spark of curiosity lighting up his face. "If you conquer a dungeon, there must be rewards, right?" "Yes, usually. Most dungeons have a boss monster on the final floor. Defeating the boss yields various rewards. For a dungeon of this level, the rewards should be quite good," Hayes said, recalling her education. Although she had never cleared a dungeon herself, she understood that encountering skeletons suggested a mid-tier dungeon, not something trivial. "Feels like a game," Kettle murmured. "A game?" Hayes asked, tilting her head. "Never mind. I was just talking to myself. I have another question." "Go ahead." "Who creates these dungeons?" "Excuse me," Hayes blinked in confusion. "Dungeons form naturally. No one creates them." "That seems odd," Kettle said. "For something supposedly natural, there are too many strange aspects. First, they always appear near densely populated areas, almost as if they're meant to attract attention. It's like they're inviting people to come and claim the rewards within." He gestured toward the walls and ceiling and continued to speak. "The way they lure people with treasures, it feels too deliberate to be entirely natural." "Now that you mention it, that does sound strange," Hayes admitted, tilting her head in thought. Like most people, she had always accepted the existence of dungeons as a fact of life, akin to birds flying in the sky or fish swimming in water. She had never questioned their origin. She wasn't alone in this. Even Alexandros seemed lost, his eyes darting back and forth as he struggled to follow the conversation. Seeing their reactions, Kettle smiled. "This is fascinating. Have we rested enough?" "Yes," Hayes replied, snapping out of her thoughts. "Then let's move on," Kettle said cheerfully, rising to his feet. The others followed, albeit more hesitantly. They continued their exploration and soon came across something in the middle of their path, a treasure chest. "What's that?" Kettle's eyes gleamed as he spotted the object. Casson glanced at the treasure chest and answered nonchalantly. "It's a treasure chest, one of the rewards you can find in dungeons. If we unlock it, we can take what's inside." Despite his words, Casson didn't show much interest in the treasure chest. Without a proper party, it was nearly impossible for him to unlock it. However, Kettle thought differently. He said with enthusiasm, "Is that so? In that case, Casson, it's all yours." "What?" Casson froze. Kettle spoke as though unlocking the chest was the most natural thing to do in the world. "That's a treasure chest, and you're a thief, right?" "Yes, well, it's true that thieves usually handle treasure chests, but..." Casson hesitated. "Then you should be able to unlock it, right?" "I'll leave it to you," Kettle said, his face alight with curiosity. For him, a thief unlocking a treasure chest was a quintessential moment in the fantasy world he adored. Casson was at a loss for words. Unlocking treasure chests was indeed considered a thief's job, and Kettle wasn't wrong. However, there was one glaring problem. If I could do that, I wouldn't be here in the first place. Dungeon treasure chests were heavily secured, requiring exceptional lockpicking skills. Only experienced thieves certified by their guilds could reliably unlock them. Possessing such skills was proof of one's status, a level far beyond Casson's abilities. As Casson lacked certification or skill, he had no chance of opening the chest. But he couldn't admit that. Kettle's eager expression bore down on him, and the thought of disappointing the barbarian filled him with dread. He'd probably think of me as a completely useless thief who can't even manage such easy tasks, Casson thought dejectedly. The memory of the skeleton's crushed skull flashed in Casson's mind, and he imagined his own head suffering the same fate. "Haha, I'll give it a shot," Casson said nervously, forcing a smile. Approaching the chest, he pulled out his makeshift lockpicking tools meant for breaking into common houses, not something as complex as a dungeon chest. "Oh, so that's the kind of equipment you use for lockpicking. That's fascinating," Kettle said from directly behind him, his eyes fixed on every movement. Casson felt the weight of Kettle's gaze and thought his heart might stop. Suppressing his trembling hands, he carefully inserted the tools into the lock. Think, Casson," he told himself, recalling the techniques he had seen more skilled thieves perform when he had worked as a porter in his youth. With his life seemingly on the line, Casson mimicked their methods. Miraculously, the lock clicked open. "It worked," Casson murmured, nearly collapsing in relief. "Excellent," Kettle exclaimed. "Truly amazing. That's impressive," Hayes added, her eyes wide with surprise. Unlike Kettle, she knew how difficult it was to open dungeon chests without proper skills. How did I even do that? Casson wondered in utter disbelief. Mimicking something he had observed felt like an impossible feat, yet it had succeeded. "Outstanding work, Casson," Kettle praised him sincerely. Steadying his shaking legs, Casson opened the chest. Inside were a handful of silver coins and ornate but slightly rusted decorations. "There's a lot here," Hayes said excitedly, her eyes sparkling. Inspecting the items, Kettle asked, "How valuable is this?" A healthy adult could live luxuriously for about a week with this," Casson estimated. "Not bad," Kettle said with a grin. "Let's organize the rewards, Casson. That's your task." "Yes," Casson replied, hurriedly pocketing the items. For a brief moment, he considered keeping some for himself, but the image of Kettle's crushing palm banished the thought. The party continued onward, eventually reaching the end of the second floor. There, they found the scattered remains of skeletons. 4 skeletons total, Casson observed. "I'll handle 3. The last one is yours, Kettle declared. Understood, the others agreed without protest. As they approached, the skeletons stirred, coming to life. Casson skillfully lured one away, isolating it from the others. Meanwhile, Kettle observed the party's coordinated battle. Clang! Alexandros raised his shield, blocking an attack with a grunt. Casson exploited the opening, striking the skeleton's neck with his dagger. When the skeleton turned toward Casson, he had already retreated to a safe distance. Alexandros then delivered a solid blow to the neck with his sword, weakening the joint further. Hayes contributed as well. Shadow of Deception, disorient them. As she chanted, her magic distorted Alexandros' presence, causing the skeleton to stagger in confusion. Alexandros and Casson seized the opportunity to strike simultaneously, shattering the skeleton. Watching the battle, Kettle trembled with excitement. The warrior holding the front line, the thief attacking from the shadows, the priestess providing support, it was the textbook definition of a perfect party. The sight filled him with joy. Ordinarily, such seamless coordination would have been impossible. The party was newly formed and lacked personal bonds. Under normal circumstances, their efforts would have been clumsy at best. But this time, they were united by a singular thought: the barbarian is watching us. If we show weakness, we might die. Under Kettle's scrutinizing gaze, they achieved flawless teamwork. Soon, the skeleton was defeated, and Kettle, who had been merely spectating, clapped his hands in satisfaction. "Let's take a short break," Casson suggested, his voice shaky. "Whatever you prefer," Kettle replied amicably. While the others rested, Kettle reflected on the strength of the party. Those men who sought me out in the white snowfield weren't weak after all. With a clearer understanding of the outside world's power dynamics, the party continued deeper into the dungeon. The third floor also housed skeletons, though their numbers increased. Yet, with Kettle leading the charge, they pressed forward without issue. At least, they arrived at the dungeon's heart, a spacious chamber where a single-armed skeleton awaited. Unlike the others, this skeleton wasn't scattered in pieces. "That skeleton knight," Hayes muttered, her voice trembling. "Impossible. Why is something that powerful here?" "How is it different from the other skeletons?" Kettle asked. "It's strong, extremely strong," she replied with a grim expression. The skeleton knight was a formidable monster, capable of wielding a longsword and shield with precision. Only those with a knight's level or higher could hope to defeat it. For their party, it was far beyond what they could handle. "What happens if we decide we can't clear this and retreat?" Kettle asked the group. "In that case, the estate will send someone to verify the dungeon. If they find our decision justified, there shouldn't be any issues," Hayes explained. "Sounds reasonable enough," Kettle said before striding forward without hesitation. The others had no time to stop him. Recognizing Kettle as an intruder, the skeleton knight charged with heavy footfalls. Kettle swung his palm. The skeleton knight raised its shield to block, but the force of Kettle's strike crumpled the shield like paper. His hand continued forward, smashing through the helmet and skull in one blow. "Is it over?" Kettle asked casually, brushing off his hand. "Why, yes," Hayes stammered, her face pale. With the boss monster defeated, no more monsters appeared. Before them stood another treasure chest, guarded until now by the skeleton knight. "Casson," Kettle called with a big smile on his face. "It's impossible," Casson stammered, shaking his head. The chest emanated a red glow, indicating a high-level lock. "There is no way I can unlock that. The mechanism is far beyond my skill." "That's unfortunate," Kettle said with a sigh. "What a shame." "Yes, I'm sorry. I think we should just—" Before Casson could finish his sentence, Kettle slammed his fist onto the chest, shattering it completely. Silver coins and ornate decorations spilled out. "There are more rewards in this chest than the other one," Kettle remarked with a satisfied nod. "Casson, take care of it." "Yes," Casson replied, walking over with trembling steps. He thought as he suppressed a pang of indignation. Why did he even bother asking me to unlock it if he could just smash it open? With their task complete, they exited the dungeon. Behind them, the entrance began to collapse with a deafening rumble. "What's happening?" Kettle asked in surprise. "When a dungeon is cleared completely, it collapses and disappears. I guess there wasn't a secret room in this one," Hayes explained. "A secret room, those exist too?" Kettle asked, intrigued. "Yes, though they are rare," she replied. "That sounds exciting," Kettle said, laughing heartily. His laughter sent shivers down the spines of his companions. Secretly, they were relieved there had been no hidden chambers in the dungeon. The party returned to the estate's walls, where the guard commander was waiting. "How was it?" the commander asked. "Quite satisfying. I'm just glad we're alive," Kettle replied cheerfully. "I see," the commander said, momentarily taken aback before clearing his throat. "I'll need to conduct the verification process. Follow me, one at a time." Clearing the dungeon wasn't the end. Each member had to provide a report, ensuring there were no troublemakers among them. Typically, such debriefings were rife with complaints and accusations, especially when strangers were forced to work together. But this time was different. "We didn't have any issues," Hayes, Casson, and Alexandros all said, their responses vague but devoid of complaints. Their exhaustion was palpable. "And the barbarian?" the commander asked. "He is probably fine," they all replied in a similar manner. "He doesn't seem like the type to cause trouble." Though Kettle was undeniably monstrous in strength, he hadn't harmed them. On the contrary, in hindsight, he had been quite gentlemanly, far removed from the brutish reputation of barbarians. They had been scared unnecessarily. Kettle, meanwhile, enthusiastically praised his companions. Casson was outstanding, disarming traps and even unlocking a treasure chest. Alexandros held the front line as a reliable warrior. Hayes supported us with her prayers, aiding in every battle. "I see," the commander said, surprised by Kettle's glowing review. After some deliberation, he made his decision. "Permission granted, but if you cause trouble, you will be banished from the estate. Be careful." "Understood," they replied. The commander handed them a pouch. "Here's the reward for clearing the dungeon. Distribute it among yourselves." Though it was common for guards to claim the rewards for themselves, the commander decided against it this time. "Thank you," Kettle said, taking the pouch. "Let's divide this fairly among us." "What?" Casson asked, startled. "No, it's fine," Hayes interjected, alarmed. But Kettle shook his head. "We're a party. We share the rewards equally. Do not refuse." "Understood," they mumbled reluctantly. "Now, how about we celebrate? Let's find a tavern nearby and have a drink," Kettle suggested with a wide grin. "What?" Casson and the others exclaimed, but Kettle's cheerful demeanor left no room for refusal. They were promptly dragged along, their protests muted by his enthusiasm. Watching them leave, the guard commander sighed. A barbarian capable of defeating a skeleton knight in one blow. Such strength was monstrous, likely at least on par with a knight. Yet Kettle wasn't an ordinary barbarian. He was polite, considerate, and intelligent, a true anomaly. "The legendary barbarian," the guard commander muttered. After some thought, he made a decision. He ordered his men, "Strengthen the watch." "Yes, sir," they replied as the commander walked away, heading toward the Lord's castle. The guard commander carefully knocked on the clean yet elegant door. A voice promptly invited him to enter. The commander stepped inside, bowing respectfully as he greeted, "I am here to see the Lord." A middle-aged man was seated in the chair behind his desk. Judging by the scattered documents across the tabletop, he appeared to have been busy processing paperwork. The man, with strands of gray hair starting to show, spoke without looking up. "What is it?" "4 outsiders have entered the estate," the commander replied. "That doesn't seem like something that requires a report. There must be something unusual about them." "Yes, my lord." The guard commander nodded before continuing. "One of them is a barbarian." The lord's face tightened into a grimace. From what he knew, barbarians were simple-minded, brutish beings who resolved everything through sheer force. The problems they caused were too numerous to count, which was why most estates did not allow them to enter altogether. "Did you grant them permission?" the Lord asked. "I deemed it unlikely to cause significant trouble." "If you, the guard commander, made that judgment, then so be it. In that case, what's the issue?" "The barbarian is strong, dangerously so." The guard commander gulped, then continued speaking. "Strong enough to be a potential problem." "How strong are we talking?" "From what we've confirmed so far, he defeated the skeleton knight with a single strike." The Lord's eyes widened in shock. Skeleton knights were monsters that even seasoned knights struggled to face. He couldn't believe that a powerful monster like that had fallen in a single blow. "Are you saying the barbarian is advanced?" the Lord asked. "That seems very likely." "And the possibility of being beyond that?" "I can't rule it out, sir." The Lord let out a dry chuckle. A barbarian of such caliber, brutish beings who believed strength was synonymous with order, posed an even greater headache. As the Lord rubbed his temples in contemplation, the guard commander spoke up again. "However, he seems to have a sense of decorum." "Decorum?" "Yes, my lord. One might call it etiquette or perhaps refinement. He exhibited a surprising air of dignity." "Dignity? That's not something you would expect from a barbarian." "Indeed, sir. I thought it was worth reporting." The guard commander watched the Lord closely. The Barkan estate had once been impoverished. Situated at the kingdom's farthest edge and bordered by the white snowfield, it held little appeal to outsiders. It was this very Lord, Luke Barkan, who had built it up to what it was today. After a moment of thought, Lord Barkan tapped his desk decisively. "Summon him. I will see him myself." "Are you sure about this?" "It's unsettling to have someone of such strength roaming the estate unchecked. I will feel better assessing him with my own eyes." "It would be dangerous, sir." "I have my knight to protect me." Lord Barkan's tone carried absolute confidence. Reminded of the Lord's trusted knight, personally trained by the legendary swordmaster, the guard commander felt a measure of reassurance. "What do you think?" Lord Barkan asked, directing his question toward the shadowed corner of the room. The knight, silent until now, rested a hand on the hilt of his sword. "He may possess strength, but at the end of the day, he is still a barbarian. They are brainless brutes. He will be defeated by the swordsmanship honed through millennia of history." Lord Barkan nodded at his knight's confident response. "Bring the barbarian. I will speak with him personally." Kettle bit into a chicken leg. The crunching sound echoed as he gnawed through, leaving nothing behind. The sight of him chewing through the bones made his companions grimace in disgust. Kettle, however, laughed heartily, clearly pleased. "Delicious. This is a fine establishment. I like how quiet it is." Of course, no tavern was ever truly quiet. The oppressive aura radiating from Kettle was what silenced the drunken patrons, compelling them to keep their mouths shut. "You guys eat too. I'm paying," Kettle said, grinning. "Ha ha, thank you." His companions responded with forced laughter, nervously exchanging glances. Kettle began peppering his party members with questions in high spirits. "You said you were a paladin, right?" "Why, yes," Alexandros stammered. "Then you must have a god you serve." "No, I do not believe in any god," Alexandros replied, shaking his head. Kettle frowned in confusion. "How does that work? Paladins draw power from faith, don't they?" "You're correct." "And yet you don't believe in a god. How does that make sense?" Hayes interjected softly. "The concept of holy power varies. People like me rely on faith in a deity to perform miracles or wield divine authority. Paladins, however, derive their power from belief in themselves. Those who serve a god and use their power are called holy knights." "Interesting, so that's the distinction," Kettle mused, his curiosity piqued. "In that case, Alexandros, what about your holy power? I don't recall seeing you use it in the dungeon." "Ah, well, I'm still in training. My holy power hasn't awakened yet," Alexandros admitted. "That's unfortunate." Holy power drawn from self-belief, Kettle thought. He wondered if he could achieve it too. The thought amused him, and he entertained the idea briefly before turning to Hayes again. Your god's name is Kaloja, isn't it? Is there a shrine or temple to Kaloja around here? I would like to offer a prayer, Kettle said. I doubt there is one in this region, Hayes answered hesitantly. Kaloja isn't a particularly popular deity. The god of lies and deception, Kaloja, was largely shunned and ostracized by the masses. Perhaps there's a temple dedicated to another god, Hayes added. Oh, really? What kind of god? Kettle asked. Well, Hayes stammered. For a follower of a god to name another deity was considered disrespectful. Hayes avoided answering, her discomfort palpable. Sensing her unease, Kettle raised a hand apologetically. Forgive me, I shouldn't have asked. No, it's fine. The awkward atmosphere lingered as the party continued drinking. None of them wanted to stay sober in such a stifling environment, and the alcohol eventually began to take effect. Emboldened by the liquor, Casson dared to speak up. Kettle. What is it? Kettle asked, setting down his drink. How strong are you exactly? The other members of the party, who had been lulled into a daze, suddenly snapped to attention. Kettle's strength was undeniably extraordinary, far beyond their comprehension. They couldn't help but be curious. Kettle, however, shook his head. That's a question I should be asking you. I don't know how this world measures strength. Oh, Casson muttered, realizing his mistake. Kettle was, after all, a barbarian, a foreigner unfamiliar with the norms of their society. His flawless use of the common tongue had made them forget. Are there established categories for strength? Kettle asked him. Yes, rightly, Casson replied, gulping before explaining. There are 5 tiers: novice, intermediate, advanced, transcendent, and hero. And where do you all stand? Kettle asked, genuinely curious. We don't even qualify as novice, Casson admitted, his voice tinged with shame. Even novice warriors are considered strong. Achieving that rank isn't easy. The categorization of strength, it seemed, was a mark of rarity and achievement. Even novice warriors were regarded as formidable in smaller estates. Kettle stroked his chin thoughtfully. What about the skeleton knight? You need to be at least intermediate to face one. Someone who is advanced, like you, could take it down with ease. Advanced, Kettle murmured. The label didn't mean much to him. What about those called transcendent and hero? How powerful are they? They are extraordinary, Casson answered immediately. I've never seen one myself, but even if only a fraction of the rumors are true, their power is beyond imagination. Legends spoke of individuals who could cleave the sky, split the earth, part the seas, and shatter mountains. Transcendents and heroes were mythical figures, revered and feared. The champion and the swordmaster are said to dwell in that realm, Casson added. The champion and the swordmaster, Kettle repeated, a grin spreading across his face. The thought clearly entertained him. To Casson, however, that grin seemed ominous. He couldn't shake the suspicion that Kettle intended to challenge such beings someday. Is he smiling because he wants to fight them? Casson thought, a chill running down his spine. As the night wore on, Kettle continued to question them, and they answered reluctantly, each drink loosening their tongues a little more. By the time the tavern began to close, a trembling waiter approached to inform them. Kettle sighed, rising from his seat with regret. So, I guess it ends here. Do any of you have plans for tomorrow? Yes, we're very busy, the party members hastily replied in unison. What a shame. I suppose this is goodbye then. Kettle strode away as he waved goodbye. Farewell, my companions, until we meet again. The party forced smiles and waved back, but their thoughts were unanimous. Let's never meet him again. Phew, this is nice, Kettle said, reclining onto the bed. He had entered a nearby inn without much forethought. Though the innkeeper had trembled visibly, Kettle managed to secure a room without incident. The bed was stuffed haphazardly with straw. Compared to the plush, cotton-filled mattresses of the modern world, it was closer to sleeping in a stable. Yet for Kettle, this was more than sufficient. Barbarians of the white snowfield had no permanent shelters. They wandered the icy expanse, digging shallow holes in the snow to sleep. By comparison, this felt like paradise. Truly wonderful, he muttered. He was, after all, in civilization now. He wondered what to do next. The possibilities were endless. There were too many, in fact, to easily narrow down. There were countless things he wanted to experience, learn, and enjoy. During his survival in the white snowfield, Kettle had come to understand one crucial truth: always set a clear objective. A defined goal brought purpose to every action, no matter how small. After some deliberation, he made his decision. I want to go on an adventure. He wanted to travel, to experience and feel everything this world had to offer. He wanted to visit the Mage Tower and the Elves' sacred land. He wanted to explore the royal capital and journey to uncharted territories no one had dared to enter. He wanted to meet the swordsmaster and the champion. Kettle yearned to fully immerse himself in this fantastical world. For now, let's take it slow. I'll savor each moment. Time was abundant. It would be a shame to rush through this world and miss out on the joys it offers. There was no need to hurry. He could take his time. With that thought, he drifted off into a restful sleep. The next morning, Kettle woke up, gazing at the ceiling above him. A satisfied smile spread across his face as he realized he had slept in a proper room. His first morning in civilization was a delight. Stretching languidly, he prepared to step outside when a knock interrupted him. Kettle rose slowly and opened the door, finding the guard commander standing there. "You're awake," the commander said. "What brings you here, Commander? Is there a problem?" Kettle asked him. "There is no issue," the commander assured him, pausing to catch his breath before continuing. "The Lord wishes to meet with you." "The Lord," Kettle repeated. The guard commander was talking about the lord of the estate, the ruler of this land. After a brief moment of thought, Kettle nodded and said, "Understood." In this world, there existed a significant disparity in status. A lord, a solitary ruler of vast lands, was a figure of immense authority. Meeting such a person intrigued Kettle. The guard commander was momentarily taken aback by Kettle's swift agreement, but soon composed himself and gestured. "Then follow me." "Is it all right to go like this? Shouldn't I wear something more appropriate to meet a lord?" Kettle asked, glancing at his simple leather vest. Meeting a noble dress like this struck him as exceedingly rude. "There's no need for that. Lord has granted permission, so you may come as you are," the guard commander replied, flustered. Of course, Kettle's observation was correct. Approaching a noble while dressed so plainly could have been seen as an offense worthy of execution. Yet no one had anticipated a barbarian to care about such decorum, so neither the guard commander nor the lord made an issue of it. "Good, that's a relief. It's not easy finding clothes that fit me," Kettle said, chuckling. He gestured for the commander to lead the way. "Shall we?" "Yes, this way," the commander replied, guiding Kettle toward the lord's castle. As they walked, Kettle leisurely surveyed his surroundings. Though he had seen the territory briefly upon his nighttime arrival, exploring it properly now was unexpectedly enjoyable. "The place is cleaner than I thought," Kettle thought. His perception of medieval settlements had been that they were filthy. There were tailies that umbrellas and heeled shoes had been invented to avoid stepping in waste or being soiled on the streets. Given the lack of advanced sanitation concepts, it was understandable. However, this place was different. The streets were spotless, and not a single piece of trash littered the ground. Perhaps the presence of magic and gods made the difference. Kettle observed the area with great interest, his behavior striking the commander as unusual. At first, the guard commander assumed Kettle was merely impressed by the city. But upon closer inspection, it seemed more like he was studying it, like a scholar analyzing his surroundings with keen interest. After some hesitation, the commander shook the thought from his mind. Whatever Kettle's intentions, it would ultimately be the lord's decision to handle him. Before long, they arrived at the castle. "The lord has summoned him. Step aside," the guard commander commanded. "Yes, sir," the castle guards, initially startled by Kettle's imposing presence, fumbled nervously but quickly straightened upon recognizing the guard commander. Kettle entered the castle, his gaze roaming with fascination. Maids and servants screamed and scurried away at the sight of him, but he paid them no mind, too engrossed in admiring the castle's interior. When they finally reached the reception room, the guard commander stopped and knocked on the door. He then turned to Kettle. "Apologies, but you cannot bring weapons before the Lord." "Understood." Kettle handed over his axe without hesitation. Despite its aged appearance, the weapon retained its deadly sharpness. The guard commander's expression wavered as he accepted it. A barbarian willingly handing over his weapon. That's a first. "I've brought him, my lord," the commander announced. "Let him in," came the response. The door opened, revealing a middle-aged man with streaks of gray in his hair. This was the lord of the estate. Kettle couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. In the past, there had been a saying that nobles had blue blood. This came from the notion that their unblemished skin, untouched by labor, made their veins more visible. It also symbolized the perceived divide between nobles and commoners, as if they were a different species altogether. And now, Kettle was standing before a true noble. The lord approached him, extending a hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, barbarian. I am Luke Barkan, the lord of this territory." In that moment, a fragment of Kettle's past knowledge surfaced. Having studied mythology, history, and fantasy, he recalled the proper etiquette for meeting a noble in medieval times. Grasping the lord's hand, Kettle returned the greeting with a polite bow. "I am Kettle, a barbarian. It is an honor to meet you, Lord Luke Barkan, rightful ruler of the Barkan estate." Kettle bowed respectfully, adhering to proper etiquette. The lord's eyes widened in astonishment. Barbarians never lowered their heads to someone they did not acknowledge. The more aristocratic their opponent, the less likely they were to show any deference. For barbarians, strength was everything. Nobles who relied solely on their lineage to wield power were objects of contempt. Thus, the lord hadn't expected Kettle to display even a semblance of respect. Despite any air of dignity he might possess, he was, after all, still a barbarian. Yet here he was, demonstrating a level of refinement that surpassed even many nobles. As the lord reeled in surprise, Kettle was inwardly thrilled. I actually greeted a real noble. Kettle was meeting an aristocrat, a figure once thought to have different blood coursing through their veins. While some countries still had a noble system, in Kettle's homeland, Korea, such concepts were relics of a distant past. To encounter a noble, shake their hand, and perform a respectful bow as he had learned, this entire scenario delighted him. He couldn't suppress the giddy grin creeping onto his face. Lord Barkan, watching Kettle's expression with a mix of amusement and puzzlement, finally spoke. "Please have a seat." Fearing his laughter might slip out if he replied, Kettle simply nodded and sat on the sofa in the reception room. The sofa, large enough to seat 4, was filled by Kettle alone. Across from him, Lord Barkan turned to a maid and gave an order. "Bring us some tea." "Yes, my lord," the maid stammered, trembling as she left the room. Kettle suddenly asked, as if a thought had just struck him, "Would you prefer I speak formally?" "No need. You're not a subject of my estate," Lord Barkan replied. "Still, I am your guest and a visitor to your land. As such, it's only proper to show my host due respect." "It's fine. You can speak casually. I would find it more comfortable," Lord Barkan said, his lips twitching at the idea of a barbarian speaking in a formal tone. The thought alone made his skin crawl. "If that's what you want, I won't argue," Kettle replied, leaning back comfortably against the sofa's backrest. His eyes wandered around the room, taking in the decor. The interior boasted luxurious medieval-style furnishings. Yet, something about them was subtly different from the medieval aesthetics he had studied. It made sense. This was a fantasy world, not medieval Europe. Observing these differences was intriguing in its own way. As Kettle's gaze swept the room, it landed on a knight standing behind the lord. The knight's hand rested on the hilt of his sword as he stared at Kettle with a wary, hostile gaze. Clearly, this man was no ally. However, Kettle's eyes lit up in excitement. "A knight," Kettle inwardly exclaimed. The knight wore polished, elegant armor. The plate mail glinted as it covered his chest, a sight Kettle found utterly captivating. A real knight, a powerful human wielding a sword on the battlefield, Kettle thought. His passionate gaze fixed on the knight, who instinctively tightened his grip on the sword's handle. "He is preparing to attack me," the knight thought, misinterpreting Kettle's enthusiasm as a provocation. Just as the knight was about to make a move, Lord Barkan's voice broke the tension. "You've learned proper etiquette, I see." The way Kettle had greeted him earlier was unmistakably the work of someone educated in refined manners. Moreover, it was a particularly sophisticated style. "Someone taught me," Kettle admitted. "From which kingdom is this etiquette?" Lord Barkan noticed subtle differences from local customs. "I don't know. I only learned it because the opportunity presented itself," Kettle said while shaking his head. Before Lord Barkan could probe further, the maid returned, pushing a cart with tea. I've brought the tea," she said, her hands trembling as she lifted the teapot. She poured a cup for the lord first, then approached Kettle. Her face went pale as she neared his imposing frame. Kettle, however, was silently elated. "I'm being served tea by a real maid." To him, even this small act was a significant milestone. The maid, however, seemed paralyzed by nerves. Hopping to ease her tension, Kettle offered her a gentle smile. "Thank you." "Ah," the maid's body slackened in relief. Her grip on the teapot faltered, and it slipped from her hands. Hot tea cascaded toward Kettle. "Ah," the maid gasped, her face drained of all color. In her mind, she envisioned the worst. The scalded barbarian would lose his temper, and her life would be forfeit. As the horrifying scene played out in her head, Kettle moved swiftly. He raised his cup, catching the falling tea with fluid precision. Then, with the other hand, he reached for the teapot. Lord Barkan's eyes widened in disbelief, and the knight's pupils dilated in shock. Kettle, now holding both the teacup and teapot, took a sniff of the tea's aroma and smiled contentedly. "The tea smells excellent," he said. Stunned by the near-miraculous display, the maid finally regained her senses. She dropped to her knees, bowing repeatedly. I'm so sorry, please forgive me just this once." "It's fine, you did nothing wrong," Kettle said nonchalantly, "unless the Lord believes otherwise." "No," Lord Barkan replied, still marveled at the spectacle he had witnessed. "If you've forgiven her, then that's sufficient." Lord Barkan was more astonished by Kettle's demeanor than his remarkable ability. The maid's actions had undoubtedly been disrespectful. Not just barbarians, but most nobles and knights would have punished her harshly, but Kettle had dismissed the matter without a second thought. He is certainly different, Lord Barkan thought. This was no ordinary barbarian. After dismissing the maid, Lord Barkan turned to the matter at hand. "I called you here for a simple reason. I want to evaluate you as a person," Lord Barkan said. "And have you reached your conclusion?" Kettle asked him. "Partially, but there are still some questions I'd like to ask," Lord Barkan said, his gaze sharpening. "Where are you from?" "From the coldest place in the world, a land painted white," Kettle replied. Lord Barkan exhaled sharply. The barbarian before him was claiming to hail from the legendary White Snowfield. Is he the legendary barbarian from the White Snowfield? Lord Barkan thought. "Somehow it's hard for me to believe that you're telling me the truth," Lord Barkan said. "It was a wretched place," Kettle said, shrugging. "Believe it or not, that's your choice." "Then allow me to reframe my question." Where Kettle hailed from was less important than the strength he possessed. "How strong are you?" Lord Barkan asked. "That's the wrong question," Kettle replied. "I don't know the standards of strength in this world." "I see." The Lord's gaze shifted to the knight, who gave a small nod. "Would you spar with my knight? You will be compensated, of course." "A sparring match," Kettle's lips curled into a grin. "Yes, it won't be to the death. I trust you both to respect the boundaries. A duel with a knight, Kettle chuckled. I like the sound of that. Lord Barkan instinctively gripped the armrest of his chair. A strange tension filled the room. As expected, a barbarian is still a barbarian, Lord Barkan thought. Despite Kettle's dignity and politeness, his eagerness for battle was undeniable. But for Kettle, the reason for his enthusiasm was simple. This was a rare opportunity to face a genuine knight. He was excited to face a true warrior of the fantasy world who used supernatural powers and could wield the power of aura. There was no way he would let such a chance slip by. They moved to the training grounds. The soldiers who had been training there were quickly dismissed, and Kettle was handed his axe once more. Opposite to him, the knight stood, gripping his sword and glaring at him with fierce intensity. Kettle casually stretched, loosening his muscles. Well then, let's begin. I sincerely hope there's no bloodshed, Lord Barkan announced. As soon as the words left his mouth, the knight began to approach, a menacing grin spreading across his face. Consider it an honor, barbarian, to witness my swordsmanship, the knight sneered. I hope that's the case, Kettle replied with a wide grin. He was sincere, but the knight took it as mockery, his expression twitching in anger. HMPH. The knight kicked off the ground, his body hurtling toward Kettle with remarkable speed. Let's see how he attacks, Kettle mused, holding his axe calmly as he observed the knight's movements. Then, in an instant, the knight's sword started to move. Kettle noticed a slight flicker at the tip of the blade. However, it wasn't just the blade tip. His eyes widened as he thought he saw the entire sword split. Kettle's pupils dilated as he watched the blade divide into 3 distinct sections. The split blades slashed toward him simultaneously, one at his head, the other 2 aimed at his left and right. An illusion, Kettle thought at first. However, it wasn't an illusion. Astonishingly, all 3 blades were real, so this is the swordsmanship he was talking about. Kettle stood in awe, mesmerized by the trajectory of the blades. The knight smirked. As expected, the barbarian was so captivated by his elegant swordsmanship that he was unable to respond. Feeling a rush of superiority, the knight prepared to halt his attack, certain of his victory. Then Kettle moved. Clink. With a mere flick of his fingers, Kettle deflected all 3 blades at once. What? The knight was stunned. What had just happened? Before he could process what was going on, Kettle's finger struck his chest. With a tearing sound, the knight's breastplate crumpled under the impact. The knight was sent flying backward, his body skidding across the ground before coming to a halt. He lay sprawled on the ground, groaning in pain. What? Lord Barkan, who had been silently observing, rushed toward the fallen knight. Though the knight trembled violently, it appeared his life was not in danger. Incredible, Kettle remarked softly, recalling the moment. The knight's sword had truly split into 3. So this is what swordsmanship looks like, he thought, his curiosity bubbling over. Meanwhile, Lord Barkan was utterly shaken. It only took him 1 strike. His knight was by no means weak. He was on the brink of becoming one of the advanced knights. Yet, Kettle had defeated him with a single blow. Is it over? Kettle asked nonchalantly. Yes, Lord Barkan replied, forcing himself to nod. Afterward, Kettle received permission from the Lord to act freely within the estate, and was even rewarded with gold coins before he left the domain. Back in his office, Lord Barkan sat deep in thought. He had just witnessed a barbarian who could take down his knight with a single strike. It was a monstrous level of strength. He has to be at least transcendent, he mused, and that was a conservative estimate. Kettle's true limits remained unknown. A barbarian of such power could potentially disrupt the world's balance. He said he would arrive soon, Lord Barkan thought. A particular figure crossed his mind. He was waiting for the person who mentored his knight, one of the few in the vast world to hold the title of swordmaster. Will he find this interesting? Lord Barkan asked himself. He knew this man had a keen interest in strong individuals. Surely he would be intrigued. The thought gave Lord Barkan a headache. I need to make preparations. "What are you preparing for?" A voice suddenly interrupted him. Lord Barkin shot to his feet. He had dismissed all his attendants to organize his thoughts in solitude. No one should have been in the room, yet a window had been left open, and an old man now stood there. The elder stared at Lord Barkin, grinning mischievously. Recognizing him, the lord relaxed slightly, though he still wore a troubled expression. "You never change, do you?" Lord Barkin said, exasperated. "As I grow older, I find it amusing to tease the younger generation. It seems you were discussing something rather entertaining," the old man replied with a chuckle. Lord Barkin sighed heavily, already anticipating a long day ahead. Bowing respectfully, he addressed the man, "Greetings, the esteemed swordmaster Kine. It is an honor."